Hello, one and all my little misfits and heathens, my atheists out there. How are you? And welcome back to the debate dissection, where we will be autopsying the latest and greatest of debates on the internet around science, religion, conspiracy theories, flat earth, you name it. We're going to take it apart. We're going to see what killed it. And I have with me the lovely Ember. How are you, darling? How are you?
Hello. I'm
all over the place.
I'm here.
Look, this almost was a cancel, and it's completely my fault. I thought I had a debate. My opponent thought I had a debate, but because of my foibles and my missteps in email, the people holding the debate didn't know we had it. So I had to cancel and then reset it up and then confuse Ember completely, because apparently that's my job now, is confusing Ember. So yeah, totally my fault. So somebody has to, right. You know, we can't have you sitting there, you know, thinking correctly about things. We've got to confuse you. Eric Wanda, hey Eric, so good to see you. Actually, it was Eric that sent me the video for the MMA guy. So yeah, you can blame him if I do that again. Yeah, so if I do your video, Ember, Eric, I blame you, mate. Member for 11 months. Thank you so much, Eric. Much love to everybody. Yeah, much love to everybody out there. This has been a time. It's been a stressful start to the year for a multitude of reasons. And not only because of the political system. Blame Mark Reed Phantom. How dare you? How dare you? No, this one was absolutely my fault. Like, seriously, this one was 100% my fault. I will happily admit blame for this one. You know, so yeah, but yeah, it's been a stressful year. We want to relax, we want to have a laugh, go over this debate. Dan Barker is always good to watch. I don't think that much of Andrew Lloyd Webber from last time. I know his name is Andrew Lloyd. Is it Johnson or something? Andrew Lloyd Johnson?
Something Johnson.
I don't know. It's just Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Johnson, get it here.
Johnson. Evil Mark. Yeah, absolutely. I hope it. Yeah, he's not. He's Andrew Lloyd Johnson. But whenever somebody says Andrew Lloyd, I feel like Webber should be the next thing. You know, because fan of the opera. Cats. What a genius. What a guy.
It is the correct thing to go there.
Right. And what have you been up to, Ems? What have you been doing lately?
Trying not to die.
Yeah, that's always a good. I think we've all been doing that, quite frankly. Some people do need more effort on it than others. I do admit that. It's ridiculous how much that sort of hate crimes have escalated in the recent months due to nobody in particular's racist and prejudiced bigotry rhetoric that has been coming out. Nobody in particular. I was just mentioning it's incredible just how many let's call them right-wing nationalists have come out of the woodwork in the last month or so. How many masks have fallen by the wayside, and suddenly they think it's okay to be a let's call it a World War II German appreciator, which I don't appreciate. I got to make that clear.
Yeah, it's been quite the shit show. Mostly here, but I mean elsewhere in the world. Yes. The United States has been inspiring some interesting displays in Europe, I've been hearing. Although it's harder to hear because I don't know if you're aware, but the media is being impacted here too. There's a lot of stories that the mainstream media, I know I sound like a Fox News host, but the mainstream media just is not covering.
Right. Well, I think that there's some places that give me hope. Like Germany, they had a big protest against the right-wing party, which was very good to see. But it's weird because one of our perhaps future prime ministers is talking about, DEI, and we don't even have anything called DEI. And, he wants to set up a efficiency bureau to,
Oh, okay.
It's sort of, it's a bad idea. Why do you think a bad idea is a good idea just because America is doing it? I don't understand. I don't understand. But
Well, if they start making noises about renaming bodies of water.
Right. And instead of the Great Australian Bight, it's going to be, you know, or we're going to change the Indian Ocean to the Australian Ocean. Sure, why not? Why not? Because that's not confusing at all. That's not.
No,
but it's
fine.
funny because the Maritime Authority has gone, no, not changing it. Like they're realizing just how much work it is to change this thing on every single map. They're like, nah, never gonna happen.
No.
Yeah.
Nope.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nobody respected any. I mean, hell, in every foreign language, non-English language, I suppose I should say, since English isn't everybody, whatever. It's they all have their own names for everything anyway. So what we call it in the United States by no means is going to change what anybody else calls it anywhere else.
Yeah, sorry, that's my fault again. Blame Mark. Hashtag blame Mark. Yeah,
it sounded okay to me. It's
look.
I'm bad with audio. Like I have no idea what I sound like right now.
Yeah, I have no idea. I do apologize. That's my fault again. Put my hand up. Blame me again. Hashtag blame Mark. Blame Mark Reed. There we go. It's up on the screen. I should just pin that comment. Like, seriously. I've been all over the place this week. I don't know what's been going wrong. I've just been a bit scattered. So, yeah, thanks, Eric. Cheers, mate. But anyway, I'll get this up on the screen. I've been trying to get debates through. There's a couple of leads I've got to follow up. I really, as much as I do enjoy the debate dissections, I do enjoy the fundamentalist fails, and I enjoy aimbot. I really got into this to debate, and it's just been very, very difficult. I've had to debate bro lately, and I hate debate broing. You know, like, oh, you're a coward if you don't face me in debate. But it seems the only way to get people actually into the ring. Like, it's not enough to say, hey, do you want to debate about this? They're like, and they say yes, and then they never show up. So it's sort of, I don't know. I dislike that's how you apparently get debates, but apparently that's how you get, like, if anyone's got any ideas, please let me know. I was thinking of like trying to reach out to other places and seeing if I can, because I reached out to a guy called James is Tired. He seems very reasonable. He's a Christian guy, but he seems very reasonable on his moderation, seems very fair. There was another place suggested to me, but something like the Crucible, for instance, is awful. That's awful. I do not want to go onto there because that is an awful place with awful people. It's absolutely horrific, their moderation. Like, it's not neutral. It's a place where they, you know, set things so they win, basically, which is just disgusting. So yeah, I think that if I'm going to go somewhere, it's going to be neutral. But yeah, I hopefully will have stuff coming up. And, you know, it's nice when I call into modern day debate and people are like, you know, when's next debate? Really looking forward to seeing you. That makes me feel a lot better. So thank you, everybody that supports me over there and here and everywhere in between. It's really nice. But I feel like I've got the itch to debate.
Fair enough.
Always.
Yeah. Gotta get in the ring, you know, and work those mental muscles.
Right. It was funny because Grayson's like, there's no need to overanalyze this. And I'm like, have you met me? Grayson, that's what I do. Don't try and stop me. It's the only thing I'm good at. Come on, man.
It's my superpower.
Exactly. I got nothing else. Let me have this, Grayson. Let me have this. All right. Well, let's start on this debate. Now, we got up to, was it Dan Barker's rebuttal?
Yep. Dan finished his opening. They did a brief pause to explain about the Q&A, and then Dan, we probably got a few seconds into it, but it's basically the start of his rebuttal.
Okay.
You said you needed a lot of water. Now I know why.
Just tell me if there's anything. Oh, this is.
In which if there is fine tuning, it's we who are being.
Sorry.
Never gets old. Okay, Dan, when you start talking, I'll start timing, but you can't keep delaying like this. It's just unfair.
All right. Okay, so fine tuning, by the way, which assumes the facts of physics, and which if there is fine tuning, it's we who are being fine tuned by natural selection to survive in this universe. But if there is fine tuning, then it's assuming the facts of an old universe, and I assume then it assumes the truth of evolution, because that's how we got where we are, through the chemical processes and through carbon in stars and all of that. So I would like to ask you, Adam, later when you get a chance to reply, for a better definition of a God, not just some spaceless, timeless. You know, in the Old Testament, God had a body. He had a face, he had hands. Moses was told not to look at his face. You can look at my backside. What was Moses actually looking at?
Yeah.
You know, when he was looking at the backside, was there something physical there? Of course, modern Christians have sort of
a divine behind.
Divine ass. Divine derriere.
you know, turn God into a immaterial thing, whereas in the ancient times, of course, they believed God was an actual being. There's a book out called God and Anatomy by Francesca Stavrakopoulou, who points that out. So please give us a better definition of what this
with Christianity too. You know, the whole, now you can make a case that at the time, the adoptionists, they believe that Jesus was like the adopted, the anointed son of God, whatever. But, you know, modern Christianity, where they say that Jesus was God.
Yes.
God had a body. That if Jesus was God, then God had a body. What do you mean he's immaterial? There he was, assuming he existed. Different conversation though.
Yeah, I know. And it depends on the Christian you're talking to, because sort of the ideas of God depend on the Trinitarian thing or not. So, you know, like, but his point is that the Father in the Old Testament was supposed to be immaterial, but Moses was looking at him. So how do you look at something immaterial, and does it invalidate the whole idea that we, you know, divine hiddenness, we can't find evidence of God? Well, if the people back in the Old Testament were told not to look at him, shouldn't we be able to see God, or, you know, be able to in some way test for God?
Yeah, he wandered around the Garden of Eden, spoke to Adam and Eve. You know, he did a whole bunch of things. I mean, the entire nation of Israel supposedly saw him riding a column of flame during that whole Ten Commandments thing.
Right. He was definitely present in some kind of physical plane at that point. So why vanish from it?
Being is not just some best guess. So when I talked about fine tuning,
checks notes.
If there's a God, why would he need to tune anything? I mean, why would he need to fine tune? It looks like God has stumbled onto this scene where there's all this randomness, and he goes, "Oh, I'm going to have to tune this. I'm going to have to tune that, and pretty soon I'm going to make it so that human beings, which are the most special thing in the universe, besides me, human beings can exist. I'm tuning this dial and this dial." Victor Stenger, whom I talked about earlier, pointed out that yes, it is true that if you did turn this one dial by the smallest amount, well, then life would not be permitted. But he showed if there's more than one dial, you could adjust this constant, and forgive me for not remembering the exact constant, but then if you adjust this one this way, like riding a bicycle, you could stay in balance. There are many other ways that life-permitting universes could exist without being in this exact universe that we're in. It may.
And we don't know what other universes could even be possible, or if a universe could form at all under any other, like, we're sort of assuming a whole bunch about what these constants could be in a universe. It may be that these constants was the only way a universe could form, or, you know, the subset of universes that can form are absolutely only, you know, within this certain range. They're sort of assuming the constants could be literally anything, and we don't know that's true because we don't know what caused it. So there's a whole wide range of assumptions going on here. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sure. There's also, as we have to put in every time this comes up, just because the universe isn't life permitting for us doesn't mean it's not life permitting. Something else might be able to arise there.
Right. Yeah.
It may be different from ours, and it may evolve through natural selection in a different way, but it doesn't. What he does is he doesn't say there's just one denominator to the probabilities. If you take these huge numbers they give, the probability of one of these constants being off, it assumes that the numerator is just one. And so if you're going to make an argument from abductive reasoning for the existence of something that we don't know about, but you're going to propose as a prime suspect, then why can't I use the same abductive reasoning to say, well, then this justifies the hypothesis of a multiverse? You know, there may be ways to confirm a multiverse, but right now, if we can use your same reasoning, we could argue that, well, a multiverse is a good example. Let me tell you a story.
Okay, so just for a refresher, anyone that might have forgotten or anything, abductive is appeal to a probability. So deductive is like sort of you've got a bunch of suspects and you're taking away suspect by eliminating them, and you're left with the one it must be. So that's the murderer or whatever in your little thing. Inductive is saying, okay, I've got a bunch of people here. I'm going to find clues that leads me to the murderer. Like, so I find somebody's, cigarette, and then you find burns on their hand, and you go, oh, well, it was this guy that did it. It's finding sort of repeatable clues that lead you to a conclusion of this person did it. Abductive is using pure probability. So it's like saying, hey, most murders are committed by right-wing single Christian male, and basically assigning probabilities and saying, well, that's the most probabilistic one. So you see the problem there. It's, number one, a probabilistic evaluation doesn't actually tell you the actuality of things. All it tells you, and because improbable events happen, we know they happen. We've got a list of improbable events that occur a lot, like a lot. And then, you have the thing of, well, if any of your prior estimations on probability, if you're wrong and it's actually, white women that do most of the murders, then that renders your abduction invalid. So probability is useful, but I don't think it will actually tell you anything concrete about the world. It'll just tell you what's likely.
Right.
It's just, yeah.
It can tell you where you might want to start looking, but it won't bring you anything conclusive.
Right.
You still have to use something else to verify you found a correct conclusion.
Well, you can get sort of, because of the law of large numbers. So the law of large numbers basically says the higher the sample size of whatever demographic that you're doing, whatever study that you're doing, the more it will approach the actual probability of that taking place. So it's basically that, if you've got 1,000 people, you will be able to make some statistically significant probabilities from it. The problem is that we've got a sample size of one universe. So sort of saying, hey, and we don't even know how this one started. So, that sort of throws all probabilities. Now, you can do a Bayesian analysis, but that relies on prior assumptions, which again, the prior assumptions, if any of them are wrong, you can throw that Bayesian study out the window, and they will assume all kinds of things. So Dan Barker here, he's appealing to the idea that they're saying, hey, it's improbable if you have one universe and it just came about with all of these things perfect, or what they say is perfect, then the unlikelihood of that on one chance, yes. But if there's like been 1 billion universes, some of which have collapsed, some of which have, somewhere else, then it's not improbable at all. It's almost a certainty we would have this universe, because it's almost certain that one would arise with these particular variables. So that's what he's appealing to. But I don't think you have to be honest with you. I really don't.
You're convicted of a horrible crime. You're blindfolded. You're tied to a stake, and you're being told that you're going to be executed by 100 expert shooters. And you hear, ready, aim, fire, and you hear the crack of 100 rifles, but you're still there. Do you just go, oh, I guess I was lucky? That calls out for some kind of explanation, doesn't it? Did a wind come along and blow the bullet? Or did they actually all miss at the same time? Or you could think of a number of prime suspects. You could think of a number of possibilities. What's the best explanation? Well, maybe they all like me and they missed on purpose. That would be one explanation. Maybe more like a theistic explanation. But what if you took off your blindfold and looked around and you learned that there were 101 prisoners being executed that day? None of them missed. You happened to be that one out of 101. Whoever it was would be the one standing there going, I'm here. Is it luck? Well,
I think statistically, like people have a general aversion to shooting to kill. They have this problem with firing squads that everyone wouldn't want to be the one to kill them, so they all kind of missed upon occasion, which is just, you know, in human nature, we don't want to, you know, take the life of somebody we don't know. If, you know, even if we think it's our duty, we'd rather somebody else do it, which is fair enough.
That's one of the reasons they use a squad, partly because people are unreliable, partly because somebody could miss, and partly so that a person can never really know if they're the one who actually killed the person. But then there's also a few instances, like what was his name? Patrick Henry, I think, the American revolutionary. He was a pretty well-respected person, but of course he was also a traitor to the English crown. So when he was captured, they had to hang him because they could not get a firing squad to shoot him. They refused.
Really?
They said, we'll all miss. Go ahead and try us.
Wow.
Or so goes the legend anyhow.
Yeah. But that's interesting. That's very interesting. So he was the give me liberty or give me death guy, was he?
He was the I regret I have but one life to give for my country. Although he may have said the other thing. I'm not sure who said that one.
Well, apparently he died of stomach cancer. They didn't hang him either.
Well, that would not be him then.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, there was some other guy. Okay, but the point still stands. I get that.
Yeah.
Some people say that's why stormtroopers appear to have bad aim, because they're aiming at people with human faces, but they're wrong. They missed a New Hope because they needed to track the rebels. Yeah. That is this story. Yeah. Why the elite stormtroopers can't hit anything, but that doesn't explain why they were so terrible in the against the Ewoks in the Battle of Endor. So explain that one, Reed. I challenge you, mate. Explain that one. Attacked by teddy bears, the Empire's elite suddenly are incapable of hitting anything.
Well, yeah. So if that number in the numerator is higher than the number in the denominator when you're calculating your probabilities, then you have a near certainty. In fact, then how do you know that the numerator is not orders of magnitude larger than that? And it doesn't even have to be some weird kind of multiverse. It could just be different pockets within our own cosmos where the laws are slightly different, in which case any observer, some people call this the weak anthropic principle, any observer obviously is going to exist in a universe that permits observers to exist. I mean, that's just pretty clear.
Right.
A universe with...
It's like someone winning the lottery and then going, you know, well, someone's got to win the lottery. Someone always does. And just because it's you, you're going, well, you know, it's impossible that I won the lottery. No, someone's got to win it. But, you know, yeah, it's unlikely, but someone will win it. And that person, whoever won, will go, oh, it's almost impossible that I won it. That's the whole point. That's the weak anthropic principle.
The luck spell I cast just before the drawing clearly worked.
Well, that's where, you know, we try to explain improbabilities with some sort of agency. Like, because when things are improbable, we go, well, something must have changed it so then it happens. But no, it's just with enough events, improbability becomes certainty. Like, I remember the story of a girl who released a red balloon in England with her name on it. And the balloon went up and landed in the backyard of somebody that had exactly the same name and was like only 2 years difference. And there was all these coincidences, but that's all they were, just coincidences. It reminds me of, I think Matt Delahunty brought this up, that the perfect bridge hand is like all of the suites all lined up perfectly. And that's actually been dealt in a competition game. And there has not been enough bridge games to be played for that to be remotely possible. But it has happened, you know, just through sheer coincidence. It happens. But it's strange that us humans, we've got to go, well, something stepped in there. You know, like something had to have reached in and changed that bridge hand, when no, nothing did. It just is sheer coincidence. Freaky stuff, but just coincidence.
With a God, fine-tuning would look the same in the universe with a God as it looks without a God. So it doesn't get you anywhere. The moral argument, I guess we're running out of time here, aren't we? There are no objective moral values. That's an oxymoron. Right. That's wrong. Because a value is a function of a brain. It's a concept, right? So to be objective is to exist independent of a brain. So how can you have a value that's a part of the brain?
Well, they don't call it moral values; they call it moral facts. That's the difference.
Mhm.
And I think that I don't think this is splitting hairs, because he's right, because I think he referred to it as objective moral values. Even if they're moral values from a god, then they're still subjective, because God's telling you what the values are. They ride this really weird line saying, oh, well, the morals come from the nature of God and they're objective. And it's really weird, because what falls under the nature of God? It's basically them just making it up as they go along. Because in the Old Testament, God was a vengeful and jealous God. In the New Testament, he's all loving. So did God's nature change? Apparently it doesn't.
He's unchanging, but he's
Right.
also it's such a whole thing. There's a lot of different ways to approach that sort of thing.
Right.
The most recent is something that Chris Maillard brought up on the Daily Atheist Morning Show, that there have been versions of Christianity where they believed Yahweh was the evil God and Jesus came to save us from him. And that's why he hasn't been seen since.
Right. That's interesting. That makes more sense than what the Christians say to me. Like 100%. That makes more sense. Why are we better theists than theists? I don't get it.
Because we actually think about this shit.
Yeah.
Exists outside of the brain as an objective thing. What you're doing is you're reifying a concept. The concept of moral values, you're turning that into a thing that somehow exists objectively.
Okay. So reification, that might be something we're not familiar with. So reification is basically mistaking the map for the place. So it's essentially saying it's mistaking a mental construct, a conception, for the thing itself. So it's basically when you say, somebody says, hey, we can cut through here on the way to the pub or whatever. And you say, no, my map doesn't show that, so we can't. That's kind of reification. Like, whether or not the map shows it doesn't mean that it is in actuality that or not. So he's basically saying, hey, you're making a reification fallacy. They would disagree that you're mistaking the mental values that we have for morality, like what we ought to and ought not to do, as some kind of thing in reality. And I kind of can get on board this, because the theists and the moral realists, the people who think this is a thing in reality, can't actually show it to us. Like, how do you look at God's nature? Well, they go to the Bible and basically say, hey, the Bible wrote about God saying this, or God saying that, or God doing this, or God doing that. But then how do you know that that's actually true? Because the book says it's true.
Book said a thing.
It
and
definitely
also
said a thing. Yeah.
Turn the page and the book says the opposite thing.
Right. You can interpret it either one way or the other. And I think that's one of the big problems we've got with books like the Bible and the Quran and any of these books. They basically are so convoluted that you can get literally anything out of them that you want to support your worldview. Right. So you can have, the prosperity gospel. Out of all the stuff in the Bible, somehow they've managed to pull together that you being rich is being God's chosen people.
You're one of the 144,000 lucky winners on the Divine Lotto show, or some shit like that. I wonder if anybody's ever done like a logical cross comparison where they take every single claim in the Bible and then like any oppositional claim, they negate each other, like just wipe out all the stuff that contradicts the other thing and see what's left, if anything. Like if you have 5 pro-slavery statements and 4 anti-slavery statements, that'll leave you with 1 pro-slavery statement overall when it's all added up. I don't think anybody has, because that sounds like a tremendous amount of work. Whole
I will say, and I think
monasteries.
Yeah. Yep.
most atheists in this room will say that most of our moral values can be objectively verified. Just like you can objectively
Yes.
verify that 2 + 2 = 4, get two apples and put them together, and you can do that. So we have values that we choose, not because they exist from outside the universe, because of the way we bump into each other in this natural biological world where harm is caused often. And these values that we have in our mind exist in our mind. And to say that they are objective outside of the mind is to beg the question. You're assuming some realm, some transcendent entity somewhere that's above and beyond space-time, above and beyond nature, some realm where these things exist. It's like a Platonic thing. You quoted Plato earlier. And yet, most of my friends, atheist friends, refuse to reify concepts into things and treat a concept as what it is. It's part of a functioning mind. That would be.
Yeah, so it's important to understand that when we talk about metaphysics in philosophy, it doesn't need to be supernatural. You're really looking at a hyperspace, and not to go back to Star Wars again. Sorry, Reed, I'll tangent you again. Not to go back to that. That basically means a sort of extra dimension to the way that we think about things. So when we're talking about conceptual stuff, we're talking that is part of metaphysics, right? It's talking about the stuff that is transcendent of the natural world. But by that, we don't mean supernatural. Like, you can have a concept of, the character out of your game. It can have a house, and that's where he lives. It is metaphysical, but it's still rooted in the physical, right? Because all of that information it comes down to electrons. Essentially, that's what it comes down to. Electrons flowing through a system. That's all. It's important to understand that when they say metaphysics, they're saying supernatural, but you can push back on that. If metaphysical things, supernatural things are metaphysical, you should be able to at least give them some kind of credence, some kind of evidence for them. Because I can show you a video game character. We can take images of dreams and things like that. They've been doing it lately with incredible results. Or images of people's thoughts, I think they've done. Like, there was a picture that I saw that was pretty damn good of somebody's sort of, looking at a picture. So it's interesting. Sorry?
Yeah, that is pretty neat. But you're right, there is a lot of confusion on the theology side about whether
Yes.
I had so much nonsense when I was in divinity school, because so many people assume metaphysics means supernatural. It's just to them it's a synonym.
Right.
No.
No, it's absolutely not. No. Like, so metaphysical things like concepts, we're aware that they are based entirely in the physical, but we're talking about them in a meta or one step removed way. We're talking about those things as if they were real. And the problem with these Neoplatonists that think that all conceptual things exist somewhere, it leads to absurdity, absolute absurdity. Like, if I imagine a four-assed baboon, that's got to exist somewhere now. And it's just like, it leads to the most absurd stuff.
Be like saying, what happens to the soul when the body dies? Well, couldn't we also ask, what happens to digestion when the stomach dies? Where does the digestion go? Does it live in another realm somewhere? Why is it that when I walk across the stage, my digestion follows my stomach?
Right, and that's sort of metaphysical. Like, you're looking at the emergent property of that system and calling it something, but it's just a concept. Like, it's not a real thing. It's a process. Like, a lot of these things, these processes, we call it something, but it's not actually a thing by itself. It's like traffic, right? My favorite example is traffic. You have traffic. Is that a real thing? No, not really. It's just the way that cars, the cars are real things, but traffic isn't really a real, it's sort of more conceptual. It's very strange that we kind of act like, oh, I've got to beat the traffic, like it's just one thing. But it's not. It's an emergent property of everything around it, as nearly everything is.
Well, I do kind of get why people can mix, muddle up that idea and that understanding, because like a wave in the ocean, for example, it's the same sort of thing. Like, we can see it and perceive it as a single object, but it's actually an emergent property of a whole boatload. Well, not even a boatload, an ocean load of individual molecules behaving in a hydrodynamic fashion.
Right.
So the wave is an emergent property, but we can also treat it as a real thing.
Yeah.
And so people, when they understand that, they kind of apply the same sort of blending of reality with concept to other things that aren't necessarily called for.
Well, it's very fascinating because I saw a physicist talking about how, like, so what we're talking about is things not being discrete objects. So by discrete, we mean just a singular sort of atomic object, just one thing by itself, that really it's a part of, like a wave. We go, oh, well, that's a wave. But in reality, it's just part of the ocean where the swell has gotten higher. It's not actually a thing by itself. So a coffee cup, we think of it as a discrete object. It's a formed, encapsulated object. But what the physicist was saying is that even though we see it as a discrete object, everything is really just electrons, and that, you know, that just happens to be the electrons in a more concentrated place, and that makes up sort of a quantum field. So the discrete object may be everything, and that we're trying to break down part of this sort of electron wave as something by itself, and that can't be that, which was just wild.
It's all photons and force fields.
Right. It's electrons all the way down, basically. And that was absolutely wild. That was absolutely fascinating. Now, I don't know if I 100% believe it. And look, the field of quantum mechanics is so young. It's such a young field, you know, like, and they're making progress. But to me, it's kind of cool that the universe might be sort of there's a hypothesis called quantum monism, that everything is just one quantum field, and the foundational thing isn't something small, it's something big. The entire thing is the foundation, which sort of, you know, really knocks our mind about how we think about things. Like, we think, oh, this is a coffee cup and it's made up of atoms, which are smaller, and then electrons circling, which are smaller still, when you've got the neurons, and then quarks kind of thing. The reason why we may not be able to find a small foundational principle may be because the foundational unit is massive. It's the entire universe, which is wild. I think that's... Now, don't get me wrong. I don't know if that's true. I'm not a physicist, but it's a wild idea that I like. It's awesome.
It is fun, and it really does mess with scale, because we conceive of the universe as being the biggest thing imaginably possible, because it's all of everything.
Yes.
But there's no reason that it needs to be the biggest thing. It can also be the smallest thing, because taking the universe as a whole, there's no scale to compare it against. The universe is beyond comparison. It is literally everything.
And so, you know, you get these questions come up, which are fascinating. Do I know that for sure? Absolutely not. No idea. Like, I think we've just started to scratch the surface. And I actually put in I was talking in my Discord, and a Discord link is available in the description. I feel disappointed upon occasions I'm not going to be here in 1,000 years to see what humanity will actually do. But, you know, at the same time, that, you know, I accept it. It's cool. It's fine. But, you know, imagine what we're like. People are like, oh, we'll never do X. And it's like, you don't know that. You don't
Every time humans will never build powered aircraft.
Right.
We'll never go to the moon.
It's more like we'll never survive the heat death of the universe. It's like, that is literally trillions of years away. How do you know that? You can't possibly know that. I'm not saying they will. Odds are, yeah, we won't. But how do you know that?
Not in our current form, but we have a whole lot of adapting to do. And that's assuming we even stay biological.
Yeah. I mean, if I was a betting man, I would sort of bet on, at the moment, wiping ourselves out of existence. If I was a betting man, but, you know, maybe maybe we'll wake up and smell the crap we've been shoveling and work together for a better future. I'm not holding my breath, but all I can do is hope. That's what I can do. And certain individuals make that harder than others.
Right. So the brain is also a bodily organ, and it's functioning, and it has things that we call values. It's a higher level. It would be more like an emergent, not even a property, but an emergent thing we describe as the values that we use to get through life. But it only works in a functioning mind. If I walk across the stage, isn't it weird that my soul is following my cranium? How does that, what's tethering it there? Obviously, it's wrong to think of a soul or a digestion or a functioning or a label for something that's working. It's wrong to think of that as a thing that needs to be explained in some way.
Well, it's odd when have you ever gotten the, well, you think you're just chemicals buzzing, bubbling away kind of thing? And you know, I'd like to point out, what do you mean just? Like, chemicals can do some pretty insane stuff. I don't know if you've seen, but you know, there's chemical reactions which are pretty insane. And it's not just that, by the way, because you also have the structure of your brain, so it's bioorganic. You've also got the signals going around your brain, so it's I wouldn't say the word electronic, but it is, you know, electrical signals as well.
Yeah, it's electrochemical plus the brain waves.
Right.
We're still figuring out what role they play to what degree, because as you frequently mention, people who have had their corpus callosum severed appear to experience two distinct minds, depending on the survey and how the tests are done. So from that, we can determine that the brainwaves are not carrying all thought and consciousness.
Correct.
There is a chemical signal component to it. But on the flip side, disturbances in brainwave pattern have been linked to all sorts of things, from what used to be called multiple personality disorder that's associated with a brainwave shift, the thinking pattern changes, to drug users finding that when you get that echo in your head when you're on certain drugs, it's because your brainwaves are out of sync. You've got a part of your brain that's repeating something that was just spread earlier, and it's so they're involved, but we're not sure exactly how and to what degree, and so it's very complicated.
Yeah. And I mean, you have evil hand syndrome, if you've ever heard of that. Like this documented case of a woman that had damage between the two hemispheres of her brain, and she was trying to put on clothes with one hand, and the other hand was trying to stop herself and grabbing her by the throat. And this is a documented cases where they've studied them under MRI and found that the other brain is actively working against you. And because the left hemisphere generally controls the right side, and the right hemisphere generally controls the left side, they are literally fighting with themselves as the two sides of their brain disagree on what they should do, which is wild. Like, that's just wild. Yeah.
We explain it only when the organism is functioning. Morality simply boils down to the intention to act with the minimal amount of harm in the real world.
Well,
that's what we mean by morality. If you're going to judge
Sorry?
It can. That isn't necessarily what it does mean. Like, I mean, to theists, morality is doing that which comports with the will of God. There's no priority system. There's no value involved. It's just God says so, so you do it that way. Some people, like Dan just espoused, have a higher priority value of minimizing the amount of harm, or doing no harm, if you want to put it simply, in a Wiccan-y sort of way. But not everybody who uses value systems prioritizes minimizing harm. Some people put the higher priority on maximizing flourishing as just a for example. And there's other things that you can do too. It isn't necessarily just minimizing harm.
No. And I think sort of that very simple utilitarianism, you know, rightfully so, it is criticized because there's other considerations. You've got to balance minimizing harm and even promoting well-being to individuals with minimizing harm and promoting well-being to the society, we've got to balance that up, and that's where the Humanist Association in their manifesto says we understand we have to balance the well-being of society with the well-being of individuals. Like, because look at it this way: you can't have a well society that is wall-to-wall humans that aren't well. It doesn't work, right? It will not be a well society. But then again, you can't have everybody being well and the actual system that you're under being horrible, right? That won't work either. So it's a balancing act where you've got to do trade-offs of one to the other, what's best for people and what's best for the society. And that's where morality comes in, like what will produce the best outcomes for there's a greatest happiness principle. And that doesn't mean happiness as in, your joy at something. It just means sort of general life satisfaction, your contentment with life, essentially. So we sort of go for what gives the most contentment in life to the most people. And that's how we kind of try to aim it. But yeah, I think, and he's running out of time. He's in a debate. He doesn't have time to expound on all of this. But
yeah,
hey,
well, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly. I knew I had a purpose and reason. Thanks, Ems.
Religion is good or bad. What are you using to judge it with? Real world stuff. Does it harm women? Does it encourage slavery? Does it, you're using actual physical, real things to measure, objectively measure whether these values you have.
Yeah, and I've said it before. I'll say it again. Like, if we can say, hey, human well-being is important, I can have a discussion with anybody about what we ought to and ought not to do. Like, we can absolutely discuss moral values. But at the time where you say, well, I'm not interested in human well-being, I'm interested in what a God wants, how the hell do we figure that out? Like, how do we have a discussion?
Ouija boards.
Right? Like, if two theists disagree on what the God wants, it's just a matter of they fight to work it out. That's it. Ridiculous.
Are worth holding on to. If they're not, you discard these values and they no longer cease to exist in a real or imagined world. So harm, I think you can boil down morality in one word, and that's the word harm. I know there are other philosophers, and some atheist philosophers might disagree with me. There's other ways of articulating morality, but
I think they're similar. I think that sort of minimizing harm and maximizing well-being is fine. Like, I think that either one will work as far as practical implementations of morality. I think, though, minimizing harm. So really, true suffering is always to be avoided, right? You have true suffering. It's absolutely pointless. But I think that humans, in order to be well, need some kind of challenge. They need something to overcome. They need to be, have a reasonable amount of, well, I've got this challenge in order to overcome. And I think that's just a byproduct of evolution. We have to overcome challenges. But, that's not true suffering. And I'm not sure about harm. So it all depends on how he's doing harm.
I've noticed that humans have a tendency to create challenges.
Correct. Yes.
Sometimes it's a straw man sort of situation. They want to build something so they can knock it down and feel good about it. But sometimes it's, hell, video games. What is a video game except a created challenge? And, someone else poses a puzzle of varying complexity, and then you defeat the puzzle and you're like, yay, I did the thing.
Yes.
We get joy from it, but a lot of it is stuff that we create ourselves, sometimes to the detriment of solving actual problems that are harder and more nuanced. Well,
yeah, that's true. But I think that challenge is absolutely, well, I think that play in general is important to mammals, in the way they think about things, the way that their brains work. It seems really important to anything with a certain level of cognition. So we see dolphins play, we see certain birds that are very intelligent play. It seems to be one of those things that they create these challenges for themselves, because if they don't have the challenge, it seems to be their brains don't work properly. Like they need these things to test them. But I don't think that would be harm. So I kind of want to give Dan the benefit of the doubt and say he's not including those, stressful challenges is actual harm. That he would say, hey, that wouldn't rise to the level of harm like, contracting Ebola or something like that, which is just true harm. So I want to be generous to Dan Barker here and sort of say, yeah, he's not talking about like when I play Dark Souls and I'm, tearing out what little hair I have left. That's harm kind of thing.
Now we know why you're bald.
Yeah, I blame Dark Souls. FromSoft, yeah, it's all your fault. Yeah, no, but I get a really good feeling when I manage to overcome those challenges. So that I find really enjoyable. So yeah. I don't think he's talking about that. I think he's more talking about suffering than harm, true suffering, which could be Dark Souls as well, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or so I've heard.
You're watching a crow hoot like an owl and drop rocks on your roof just for a reaction from me. Well, I've seen a crow, one of those weeping willow kind of trees. They have those hanging branches, or they're really, just very small. They hang basically. I once saw a crow grab one of those and bounce up and down while like flapping, like just playing on this tree. And then it saw me and just went, well, it saw me and my girlfriend at the time and just looked at us. And it's just like we're sitting there going, what are you doing? And it looked embarrassed. It looked like, dude, this is my time. I get out of here. I'm just playing on the tree. And just, I don't know, for some reason, I just went, wow, that is one intelligent bird. Incredibly intelligent. But yeah, play's important.
It's true.
I think basically, if we look at what the harm is, and whatever harm is, you can probably make a list of 100 things that you would say are harmful.
Right.
Whatever it is, it's natural, it's material. Even psychological harm has natural material because it's harming a living organism. And if you are acting with the intention of minimizing real harm in the real world, you are acting morally, because that's what we mean by morality. And I guess I would invite you to just define the word morality too.
Yeah, so this is a distinction that I think Sam Harris makes that I kind of disagree with. He says, well, morality is automatically sort of promoting well-being. Like that's what we're talking about when we say morality. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that morality as defined by Stanford, hang on a second, let me just see if I can remember this. It's the code of conduct that is agreed upon by all reasonable people, right? So what all reasonable people think we ought to do is what morality is. And that's not necessarily, well-being. That's not necessarily the case. So I don't know. It's kind of, I don't think you can automatically say morality is well-being or morality automatically is minimizing harm. I don't think you can say that.
Yeah, like we were discussing earlier, to some people, it's just whatever God says.
Right. Yeah, so whatever God commands, no matter how bad it is morality, because that is what's in his nature. So if God commands you to, take out a tribe, then that is automatically moral because it's whatever God decides in his nature or whatever God has in his nature, which is a weird thing to sort of say is morality. But I think for my money, morality can vary a lot, like a great deal. I think that different people have different ideas of what morality is. So but I don't think there's any reason why it's automatically the well-being of humans. I think you've got to, and that what the goal is, what your intention is meta-ethics. That's what that is. So where I would say my meta-ethics are the well-being of humans and human societies, a theist might say, well, it's the nature of God. Whatever the nature of God is, that's what you ought to work towards, basically. I think in both cases, you've got to show some kind of objectivity. Like, is it objective that we, ought to work towards the well-being of humans? Some people would say yes, based upon evolution. I don't think so. I don't think there's any objective reason why we have to, but a lot of humans agree that that's important, mostly because we're all human. So I don't think that's necessarily the case. So I think Dan's actually wrong here, but I get what he's saying.
Yeah. Like to build on what you were saying, the reason the trolley problem is so interesting and other puzzles like it is because it demonstrates that how people arrive at what the moral thing to do is depends on very subjective values and a priority structure. Literally no one looks at the trolley problem and goes, well, it is the nature of God to pull the lever, Yeah. That's not how anybody really looks at reality.
Yeah. And Reed, you've said, I always think the contradictions of the Bible are a feature and a bug. Right. So, and plus you've got to remember that the Bible was never read by the peasants. Okay. So you've got to understand that, right? It wasn't the case in the early church that they gave out Bibles no, it was the clergy that read them and explained them to the peasants, right? So it wasn't just that they couldn't read. Occasionally a peasant could. It was the fact that they weren't the ones to read it under their religion. It was the priests, it was the scribes, it was the educated people who would be reading this and conveying the meaning to their flock. That was the whole point. It was only with the printing press, Martin Luther, and sort of, Protestantism that actually sort of opened up, everybody reads the Bible. It didn't used to be the case. It was just the clergy that read the Bible.
I mean, that process took hundreds of years. The printing press made books more available, so it was worthwhile to learn how to read for a lot more people. It was more accessible because now there were books you could learn from with the help of a person who could read. Various things like this. But then later you needed Martin Luther to break from the church to set the stage for other translations to become even a viable thing. Well, I may have the order wrong because the whole thing with Gutenberg was the Gutenberg Bible, but whatever. You need all the pieces in place to get to the point where we've got translations in every freaking language in multiple variations.
They would say yes. I would say no, Majestic. Like, this is the thing, that if morality is relative, then it depends on your position. If you're an alien race that thinks humans are going to destroy everything, it might be for them, but it's not going to be for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say perspective does matter, but it's also not a dichotomy. Like, if you're an advanced alien race, it seems to me that a more moral solution, maybe not even the most optimally ethical solution, but a more moral solution would be to intervene and teach that species better.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Before you use the word, but how would you define morality? Is it following God's rules? That's what morality is? Or is morality using your mind to see if there is some real world objective basis for these conclusions that you have in your mind? So the moral principle doesn't get us anywhere. The fine tuning argument, it might give us a suspect, an imaginary suspect, but it doesn't get us anywhere. It doesn't get to the elves under the ground. It just gives you permission to consider that there might be some suspect out there who would answer your questions. And the cosmological argument, I think, begs the question, because when you use that phrase, everything that begins to exist, you're arbitrarily dividing reality into two groups: things that do begin to exist and things that don't begin to exist. Where did you get that from? Where did you get the idea that there would be such things that don't exist, start to exist, so that we could even make the phrase things that do begin to exist? We have no concept or no knowledge of things that do not begin to exist. And if you think...
And actually, most things don't begin to exist anyway. When what we think of as a chair, it begins to exist. Well, when does it begin to exist? When the first leg is done? When the fourth is done? When it's completely done? If it's not varnished, did it not exist as a chair until then? You've got all these real big problems with saying, hey, this thing begins to exist. It's more a mental thing, and things don't begin to exist. They just change state. Like we take a lump of wood, we shave it down, we make it into pieces, that forms the chair. But there's no adding or subtracting of matter there. It's exactly the same amount. And in fact, it's exactly the same amount of energy going into it as comes out. Like, you know, heat's created when we cut it, but that needs a certain energy to do. Like, it just changes state. It doesn't actually, you know, what has begun to exist when you think about it like that.
Yeah, it's just conceptual things. It's just rearrangements of pre-existing things. I mean, some people might say that anything is a chair if you're daring enough. You could just take the hunk of wood and just sit on that. So does it become a chair when someone decides it is a good place to sit? It's all conceptual.
Mm-hmm. And if things are just a rearrangement of matter and energy, then what has actually begun to exist out of not existing? Like, what is there? Everything began as something else. So nothing's really begun to exist except for conceptually, and that's what Ember's talking about.
Mm-hmm. It's the inverse ship of Theseus.
Sorry?
It's the inverse of the ship of Theseus.
Oh,
the ship of Theseus is a thing that is a collection of other things, but you change out the parts. I mean, we do the same thing. You know, we are one continuous experience. We refer to ourselves as a single entity, but you know, by our age, every single cell in our body has been changed out at least once. All of the atoms have cycled through, you know.
Every 7 years, I think it is, that we cycle everything in our body, kind of thing. But
it depends on the tissue, but yeah.
Well, it's important to realize that with emergent things like a ship or like a person or like a you know, whatever you have, you can swap out the thing, it's like the individual components, and still have the thing existing. It's like if you swap out the hard drive in your computer and you copy the data over, and the data's still there, it will function exactly the same, even though it's a different hard drive. Is it a different computer? No, it's the same thing. Like, it's just this whole idea, this failure to realize that it is the structure and emergent properties that make the thing, not the individual components.
So
that's important.
Our acquaintance Eric from Planet Peterson has a great example that plays on this. He says, say you start with a Honda and you start changing out parts with parts from a Mercedes-Benz. At what point does it stop being a Honda and become a Mercedes-Benz? Like,
it's the car of Theseus.
Yes.
Awesome.
You are importing your conclusion into your premise, which is called begging the question. So the Kalam argument, for many other reasons, begs the question, compares apples and oranges, and actually doesn't get us any closer to any real evidence for a real God.
I haven't edited this, so I might have to. You going, mate? Are you talking? I've seen he's got the slides back there.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So he's there. There's brief interludes between each speaking session where they do a thing.
He's got no sound. You've got no sound, mate. You've got no sound.
The AV Club needs
even
to.
though there is no God.
Yeah.
These are the atheists that I'm very interested in interacting with. Here's a list of them, and then Eric Wielenberg is the one that I write most, and we wrote that book together. He wrote the endorsement for my next book coming out. So many atheist philosophers are now affirming that there are these objective moral truths, just like there's objective mathematical truths. Then the question becomes, what's the best
objective mathematical truths?
It's pretty sus.
Like you've under certain axioms, yes, there's but that's with the axioms being like I'm not sure about that one, champ.
I mean, even if that is what they said, having a person being an atheist doesn't mean they're right about everything. You can be an atheist and still be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
I
happens
think
quite a lot.
that their objective morality is based upon physical things like evolution or, sort of animals' tendency for social cooperation and things like that. It's not based upon any kind of supernatural handing down of any prescription of what you should do. Like, so I don't know why you would use these people, because they completely, I mean, the debate's about the existence of God, and you're basically pointing out a bunch of people that deny the existence of God, even though they have objective morality, or at least claims
Right.
it.
He's
You know,
undermining his own argument. He's saying even if
Right.
there is objective morality, it doesn't necessarily point to a God. Okay, good
Right.
job. Why are you
Yeah.
making the argument then?
Well,
If it's
I
useless to your
agree.
case.
I agree. Like, just if there's objective morality, it doesn't necessarily mean it comes from a God. You've got to show that. Wow.
Explanation for these moral truths. Where do they come from? How can they exist? And that's where the moral argument, people like Robert Adams and myself argue that God's the best explanation for them.
Why is God the best explanation?
Because he wants it to be.
Because he believes it? I don't, like, he doesn't actually say why it's the best explanation. Like, because these guys don't think that God is the best explanation. So why are you leaving that off? Why are you saying, hey, they believe in objective morality, but they don't think God's the best explanation? Okay.
All right, let me respond as quickly as I can to a lot of the things. Dan brought up a lot of good issues, and I'll try to respond as quickly as I can to them. So let's talk about God of the gaps for a moment. Now, gap arguments are poor arguments, and we all have to be careful to avoid them. It's a mistake.
Yeah, I've heard this before, right? I've heard tons of theists say before, oh, we don't like God of the gaps arguments because it undermines our point. And then they go on to make a God of the gap argument. Like, how many times have you heard that? Like, oh, we're not going to make God of the gaps, but, you don't know why it is that this happened. So, the best explanation is God. And it's like, are you serious right now? I hope he doesn't do that. I would hope so. He's a lot, he's not some dude on YouTube. He's supposed to be a doctor of philosophy, I think he is, or theology maybe. So I would hope he doesn't. But, I've been surprised before.
When we have a gap in our knowledge to say that it must be God. Some theists have made that mistake. And a lot of things that people used to think were caused.
Some theists, some theists. Oh, yes. You realize there have been some theists, not an overwhelming majority of theists. I would actually color that more. Yeah. Look at the trees.
By God, we've now learned, like you said, have natural explanations. However, that doesn't mean that everything has a natural cause. It's also a mistake when we have a gap in our knowledge to say that there must be a natural cause. That would be a natural causes of the gaps. No, what we need to
What?
Well,
that's what we call a false equivalency.
Yeah, we're not sort of saying that the explanation is a natural cause. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that every single time we've investigated something, it has turned out to be a natural cause. Therefore, natural causes are the most likely, because we have discovered that there are natural causes for things. I think you would agree. Like, if you're doing chemistry, you would say, hey, yeah, God doesn't make that happen. It's just a natural cause. Okay.
I mean, we don't know. There aren't Jesus particles making water behave the same way every single time.
Yeah, okay, you got me there. I forgot about
three body problem.
Particle.
There's those tiny little protons that are fucking up our quantum physics. We don't know they're not there.
Just healing the lepers and causing mischief. Yeah, absolutely. Look, but the thing is, we're aware that natural causes exist. What we're not aware is that a God exists. So the thing that we're aware of should be the default position. It should be, because we know natural things exist. Both of us agree on that. Like, that natural things exist. What we don't agree on is that supernatural things exist. It's more just a case of every time we find out something about it's a natural thing. Now, we're not saying it's impossible for there to be a God. Nobody's saying that. But, we're basically going with what we've seen before. It's induction. It's that sort of finding clues.
Yeah.
If all the cues say it's natural and none of the clues say it's supernatural, you would expect to go with the natural option. That is fair.
It reminds me of, I forget if it was Godless Granny or Michael Beverly who made the analogy. It was when they were both delving deep into J. Warner Wallace's background. They said, you know, the way Wallace investigated Christianity, he would never do that when he was a police investigator. It's like you have a lineup of 6 suspects and you're trying to build evidence for who the guilty person might be. And he's standing in the corner going, it was the Invisible Man.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Well, you can't prove the Invisible Man didn't do it.
Right. That's an excellent analogy. You know, like, why do we jump to the conclusion it was one of the visible men? Well, when you can find and show the Invisible Man, I will consider it. But until then, we're going to go with the ones that we can see. Like, we're not saying it's impossible that there's an invisible man there, but you've got to show that first. Come on, my guy.
To do is evaluate each situation and try to figure out what's the best explanation for what we're seeing, the effect that we're seeing. That's what these arguments for God are, the ones that I presented. They start with things that we observe or experience, the beginning of the universe, design, morality, and
oh, we experienced the beginning of the universe, do we?
Were you there? Where's Kenham?
Yeah, that's news to me. I don't think anyone's experienced the beginning of the universe.
I mean, we experienced the beginning of our own personal experience of the universe.
Well, that's fair, but I don't think that's what he's saying.
No, I don't think it is either.
No, no. Like, but I don't think theists really do start with the experiences around them. That isn't, well, okay, I'll condition that. In their personal faith, that's not what they start with. They start with the God first. Absolutely start with the God first. None of them go, well, I'm going to look around and find the reason for this. They always have that God belief first. And then look around and say, okay, well, there's a tree. I can't explain it. Look at the trees. Isn't it so beautiful? It must be a God. Like, there is no possible way they start with just the experiences around them. I don't believe that for a second.
Yeah, reasoning backwards makes you do some very peculiar things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then through abductive reasoning, conclude that God is the best explanation for these things. Dan seems to dismiss any argument for God as a God of the gaps. And so I would like to hear from Dan an argument for God that he wouldn't consider a God of the gaps.
Well, that's not true. Not every argument for God is a God of the gaps. It's like, for instance, if you say, hey, well, the Bible, you know, has all of this evidence in it. And, you know, if you're making an evidentialist argument, sort of, you know, all of this evidence for it coming out of the Bible, even something like, oh, well, the religion is the most popular in the world or something. That's an ad populum. It's not God of the gaps, right? It's a different fallacy, but it's not God of the gaps. No, not every argument is God of the gaps. Things like the fine-tuning argument, right? It can be a God of the gaps because you're basically going, well, if you can't explain why the universe is fine-tuned, then it's perfectly reasonable to say a God did it. That is a God of the gaps. That's 100% a God of the gaps.
We don't know how it happened, so God must have did it.
Yep. But it's not necessarily the case. If you're sort of saying, hey, the fine-tuning of the universe shows that a God was the one to do it, and you're basically making that case, then that isn't a God of the gaps. But I would challenge that idea. I would challenge the chain of reasoning that led you to think that only a God could do it. But it's still not God of the gaps because you're not sort of saying, hey, you don't know what caused it, therefore it's a God. And I think he's trying to hide behind abduction for that. And don't forget, abduction is probabilities of something happening. He's trying to say, hey, if you don't know, it's more probable that this thing. No, that doesn't work either. Because if I don't know who wins the lotto, is it any more probable than that the person you suggest will win it? No. That probability is completely independent of what I know and what I don't know. So yeah, it doesn't work. It does not work. But yeah, he's basically pointing out God of the gaps because this guy was doing a lot of it. That's why. Doesn't mean every argument is. It just means your arguments are.
Argument. In terms of fine tuning, let me just, for sake of time, recommend one resource for you, relatively new resource. It's written by a gentleman, Luke Barnes. He got his PhD from Cambridge, and this was published by Cambridge University Press. It's a book on fine tuning, A Fortunate Universe, Life in a Finely Tuned Cosmos. Now, this science is very engaging. If you like science, this is great stuff to dive into.
Oh, damn, he's a fucking Australian as well.
What the hell?
I know, I know.
Oh, it drives me so bonkers because I didn't want to belabor the point when Dan was on it, but you can reverse the argument too. This universe is very clearly not fine-tuned for us. As we often say, every other planet we've discovered so far, we will die on immediately. Large parts of this planet, we die on very fast. You know? It's not for us.
Yes. And you know, there are, like, for instance, here's an example. We are on the outer edge of, so there's a place called the Goldilocks zone, which is basically the place around our sun that seems conducive to life. And we used to think that was a very narrow band. It's gotten a bit wider. Like, we've realized that, hey, there is a bit more leeway for life surviving, you know, as we've discovered things like extremophiles, organisms that can survive in extreme conditions. But we're on the outer edge of that. So we could be in a better spot. That's the thing. Like, you know, this whole idea that we're perfectly,
we're sloppily tuned.
We're sloppily tuned is probably right. But
that's another great example for what Dan was talking about with the weaker anthropic principle. We consider the Goldilocks zone. I've gone on whole rants about this before. It's total bullshit. It's based on the concept of the distance you need to be from the sun to have liquid water, thereby making life possible. But there's hidden variables in that statement, because to have liquid water, you require two things: temperature and pressure. And a change to our atmospheric composition would effectively change the Goldilocks zone around a star. So what we call the Goldilocks zone is only in reference to an Earth-like planet with an atmosphere like the one we have now. And there's other things too, like the presence of a big giant moon and other things, you know, to keep the geological cycle active and generate the outgassing we rely on to keep replenishing our water supply. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So calling it a Goldilocks zone it's bullshit, because it's so Earth-centric. If we had a different set of conditions, then we'd have a different set of conditions. If we involved on a different world, then that would be the conditions that make that type of life possible. We're not even sure liquid water is required. We just know for sure life can emerge when there's liquid water. Ice might work just fine. We don't know.
Because and Alex Mather, is Australia just desert Florida with less guns? No, it's Texas with less guns. Absolutely. Well, my state is Texas with less guns. I think Queensland is Florida with less guns. Yes.
Oh no.
Queensland is definitely the Florida of Australia. There's no doubt about it. But you know, Western Australia is like Texas. It's massive. You know, has a lot of mining. Occasionally wants to secede from the rest of the country. You know, the usual stuff. You know, usual stuff.
Fair.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And here's the thing, like, if you're just going to go and make an appeal to authority, like you're just sort of saying, hey, this physicist says, and not go to the consensus, I can just point at Stephen Hawking, who said, if the universe is fine-tuned for anything, it's fine-tuned for making black holes. It's perfect for making black holes. Everything points to making black holes as being the thing that it's fine-tuned for. So, you know, you can't just quote one scientist and say, hey, he's automatically right because he says it was God. No.
I specialize in the moral argument, but I really respect these folks that dive into more of these scientific arguments. The hiddenness of God. Now, I agree at times that God feels hidden. Okay, I
at
agree
times.
with that.
What do you mean feels hidden? Isn't he hidden? Feels hidden? I'm sorry, sir, but he is hidden. Like, it's not about how I feel about it. What?
You're just failing to perceive the divine.
I'm sorry, my divine radar is broken today. I don't know why. What does that mean?
You need God goggles. Like, look at Andrew here. He's got God goggles on. He can apprehend the Holy Spirit. But you and I, we're just like looking out here with the eyeballs that God gave us and can't see a damn thing.
Can't see a damn thing.
Ow.
I'm
gesticulating too wildly.
That's just gesticulate away. That's fine. Like, seriously, what do you mean? It feels like he's hidden. Oh, well, if you see the trees and your desk and the roof and, everything as God, then he's not hidden anymore. Are you serious? If you assume everything.
One electron theory. There's only one electron in the universe, and it keeps zipping back and forth through time to fill in the role of all the electrons.
Right.
And that electron is the Jesus particle. It is God.
Okay. Well, I don't have my Jesus microscope, so I can't see it. Save me.
Sometimes I wish there were more evidence for God. Obviously, the more evidence, the better. But I think there is a lot of good evidence for God, good evidence and reasons to believe in God, such as the arguments that I presented.
There's arguments. Arguments are not evidence. What are you talking about? And most of your evidence was abductive arguments, appeals to probability, which doesn't actually describe anything in reality. All it does is say, hey, it's more probable this is the case. Number one, I disagree with your evaluations of the probabilities. Number two, it doesn't get you to a God. We know a God existing. All it says is, hey, it's more likely a God exists. Yeah, but it's likely a God doesn't exist. Wow. That's incredible. His idea of evidence is shocking.
Well, Mark, there are more arguments in favor of God than arguments for no God. So, by doing a Bayesian analysis based on the probability of, why would you need to argue for a thing if it didn't exist, right?
The problem is that all of
something,
the arguments
something numbers
for God can be argued to a different God. Mm-hmm. Like, why can't you just say, hey, it wasn't Yahweh that did all of the fine tuning, it was Brahma? Like, this is the thing. This is what he said at the start of this entire thing. Well, I'm not arguing for the Christian God today. And it's like, yeah, no, I bet you're not.
It was universe creating pixies.
Exactly. Because even if you can come up with a God, which you haven't, all you've done is made a couple of really weak arguments towards it. Even if you could, you can't get to a Christian God from there. You're stuck. Because I can use exactly the same arguments for Brahma or Allah or, Zoroaster, anybody.
Doug
the God, of course. How could I forget?
These arguments start with evidence, effects we see, and then propose God is the best explanation for the cause of these things. And there might be good reasons why God...
That is literally the definition of confirmation bias. Like, you believe in God, you look at things around you, and you explain how God could have... That is literally confirmation bias. That's what it is. Because I can do the same with Brahma. I can basically, or the Blarney Stone, or any other supernatural thing. I can do the same with magic. Holy crap!
It's all magic.
Mm-hmm.
And just you might think all this technology, this internet, the cameras, the microphones, the processing, all of it. You might think that it's all evidence of a complex interconnected system of science and human achievement and engineers all over the world doing things, but really isn't just magic the best explanation? Just think of Occam's razor. Don't unnecessarily multiply entities. We could just posit one entity. It's just magic.
It's just magic.
Therefore, it's the best explanation.
I am now a magic believer, but a magician? Is that a magic? I don't know who's
magicist.
Magicist? Magicist? Gonna bloody explode my brain right now. This is insane.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Doesn't give us more evidence. For example, God might know, I'm speculating here, but for example, God may know that if he revealed himself more, it wouldn't make any difference, that those who reject him with this amount of evidence would also reject him even if they had more evidence.
Try good evidence. Try good evidence. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter how many bad arguments I give you. You're never going to believe my bad argument. Have you tried like a good one? Maybe. I don't know.
You're basically telling me, like, okay, let's put aside the question of whether I worship, adore, or accept God into my heart, whatever plaintive thing that you want to say of, becoming a Christian, right? And God wanted to convince me that he exists. Are you telling me that God does not have the power to demonstrate sufficient evidence to me that he actually exists? And don't forget, we're leaving aside whether I worship him or do any of the religious stuff around him. Are you telling me that I can convince people that I exist, but God can't convince people that he exists?
I mean, he could if he wanted to. He just,
but
he doesn't feel like it. Thou shalt not test.
He knows that won't convince me. Well, that's a you problem, sir. If I see a God, it does things that are inexplicable to me, I would probably accept it. If I said, hey, did you see that God? And the person next to me goes, no, you must be crazy, I might have some doubts then. But if I can confirm with everybody that actually happened and I'm not just hallucinating it, then why would I not believe that that thing exists? This is like they give those examples. Well, God, if God wrote in the sky, I am really real, and it was absolutely confirmed and stuff like that. I realize there's some atheists that go, oh yeah, I wouldn't believe that because I would be insane and out of my mind. But if I could confirm it with other people and through scientific means, we could say, hey, that is the hand of God. It's not a prank or anything like that. It's definitely something that a supernatural being has done. Then I would probably accept it. But why do they always give us examples of stuff that never happens? Never happens. Like it was like I saw a Matt Delahunty debate where the person was like, oh, well, if you cut my head off and I then, put my head back on and reincarnated or, resurrected and walked out of here with no problem whatsoever. And he's like, why do you always give these examples of things that never happen? Fine, do it.
Yeah, show me.
Show me.
I will be very impressed.
We will see if it's a trick or not. Like, this is the thing. Like, they always give us these examples of things that never freaking happen. And he's basically saying, hey, it's your fault that God doesn't convince you because you're not going to believe it anyway. Oh, it's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine
you're hard-headed. You're a stiff-necked people.
Could you imagine if I said to you, Ember, hey, I've got an invisible friend next to me, and they could show themselves to you, but they know that even if they did, you wouldn't believe them. So they're not going to.
Shucks.
Yeah, you'd call me full of crap, and rightfully so. That's a ridiculous excuse to blame other people's skepticism for the reason you are not demonstrating the veracity of what you are saying. That's an excuse. That's 100% an excuse.
Yeah, I might not believe it 100% if there's a reason to be suspicious, but I mean, there's no huge stakes about it. It'd be slightly hard to believe that it's actually an invisibility superpower and not just like a trick of a green screen or something.
Right.
But
right.
I'd probably believe that the person was real,
Yeah. So Left-Handed Jedi for $5 says, wait, God is a performing monkey. That's why Comfort always has a banana on hand. No, he always has a banana on hand because he thinks it was shaped by God to be perfect, which is just hilarious. Comfort is always a laugh. Always laugh. But thank you so much, Left-Handed Jedi. I really appreciate your support. Bleh.
Mm-hmm.
This is the worst thing. And the thing is that there's something in there that they say, well, God wants you to know he exists, but he's hiding from you. That one of those things can't be true.
He's very shy.
Well, a lot of the time they go to well, he'll violate free will. And it's like, oh, so he violated Paul's free will on the road to Damascus? Is that what he did? No, he didn't, apparently. So why would mine?
That's why Lucifer rebelled, because God violated his free will by being observable to Lucifer. And Lucifer said, I will not stand for this. I will fall instead. Because if you won't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, right?
Fall for anything, yeah. Well, I mean, look, I don't remember angels having free will, to be honest with you. I didn't think they had free will, so I don't know how Lucifer could have chosen anything.
Canonically, no, they don't. That's what makes humans so stinking super special. But yet somehow Lucifer managed to rebel, almost like he was programmed to do that, or
maybe
something.
I've heard Dan say on many occasions that he would reject God even if he revealed himself very obviously and directly to Dan. And if that's true, then why would God give Dan more evidence? I do want to talk about this idea of immateriality. I don't see any good reason to think that immaterial things can exist. I think a good case can be made that there are immaterial things that exist outside of space and time.
Well, it depends on what you mean by exist. So that's a very, very, it's not a weasel word, but exist is one of those words that is contextual, right? Like, so if you say, hey, the traffic exists, right? Like it isn't a thing itself, but it does have sort of a presence. Like you can say that concepts exist. Like the concept of a building exists, right? Like we have a conceptual thing, or you don't have a plan. No, my plan exists, right? Like it's all conceptual. Like it really matters. Contextual. It matters in what context you're talking about. So when we usually say exist, we're usually meaning it exists in reality, not as some abstraction somewhere, because things can exist as abstractions. So I think that he's really making exist work a lot here, like saying, oh, well, if you can say it exists, it must be in the real world. No, it's contextual. Some things exist in principle. The law exists, but really it's just a social construct. It doesn't actually have a presence in the real. We made it up. And it only exists as a shared concept between us. That's all. Like it doesn't have a physical sort of presence anywhere. Unless you think that the law is somehow supernatural, which I wouldn't put it past him, to be honest with you.
Like abstract objects, mathematical truths, as I've discussed.
Yeah, so saying maths exists, it exists conceptually, but it doesn't exist in the real world. Like, show me a 2. Not a 2 of something, but a 2.
Yeah, it's another, it's a variation of the reification fallacy. It's saying, the word tree exists. Right. But that word exists because we created it to describe this category of organisms who share this certain set of traits. There is no actual platonic tree-ness out there. Same thing with numbers, mathematical systems, logic, all this shit. It's stuff we made up to categorize and put parameters around things.
Yeah, it's describing something. It doesn't actually exist. Like The laws of logic exist in the same way the laws exist. It's a conceptual language to describe something. It describes the working of our reality. It doesn't actually exist in some supernatural realm. That's not what we're saying. We made up a language to describe these things, and things can exist conceptually, like the concept of, like the word tree exists, or the concept of the laws of logic exist, but that doesn't mean they're written on some book somewhere in supernatural land that actually makes it a thing. And I don't know why these people have to like have these things actually have presence on some other dimension. If we're going for Occam's razor, it's just a shared concept between humans. That's it. That's all it is. That's it.
The truths of logic. Many atheists, as I've noted, claim moral truths exist outside of space and time. So the idea of an immaterial being
No. Even the atheists who claim that moral truths do exist, they're not saying they exist outside of space and time. They're saying they exist independent of any particular subjective perspective.
Correct. Yeah, that they're based upon physical things in the real world that interact with one another, giving rise to these oughts. That's what they're saying. I don't know why he would think that atheists think that something exists outside of space and time. I mean, there could be, like, in the greater cosmos, there could be, but I don't know that's the case.
You can suggest it, but that isn't the same as evidence for it, or a demonstration of it, or even a good argument. Like saying, well, it could be. That's not an argument for the thing, though. I mean, as you were saying earlier, it does depend on what you mean by exist. In the colloquial sense, to exist means having a discrete and identifiable location within space and time. So anything outside of space and time, by definition, does not exist. That doesn't mean there isn't something there, but we need a different term for it than exist. But you could stretch the definition, but you should say so if that's what you're doing.
Well, yeah, and I mean that is the usual context for exist, and you can have other contexts. Like I get that, but yeah, that is the normative context. But if you want to claim something exists outside of space and time, then you've got to actually show that thing outside of space and time. Oh, you can't do that? Well, that's not my problem. Why is that my problem? Because as far as I know of a lot of things that humans just made the frig up. Like, we just made up laws. We just made them up. We made up money. There's no objective thing that says that money has to be worth anything. It's just a social construct. There's a lot of things like this. Like, there's no objective America, right? Like, it doesn't exist, like, in the real world. But it exists conceptually. It is a shared idea between people. That's what it is. And so it exists, but it doesn't exist in the real world. It doesn't exist in reality. It's just conceptual, and that's all it is.
Yeah, and we see it battle about ideas with this sort of thing. Like in Japan, they've been having a thing at least since the 90s about modern Japan versus the real Japan, whatever that's supposed to mean. It's usually meant like the traditional pre-westernized Japan.
Yeah.
But it's a concept. It's as long as people hold to those traditions and social standards and so forth, it can be said to exist in the same way that modern Japan is said to exist. It's still, it's all just concepts that people agree on.
Yeah. But they want to take it to this, well, it's somewhere outside of space-time. No, it's still just is
Japan
in our mind.
Exists outside of space and time.
I knew it.
Transcendent.
I knew it.
Transcendent Japan.
I knew that something with that much hentai had to exist outside of space-time, quite frankly. It's terrible. Terrible.
Space and time isn't incoherent. Many atheist philosophers like John Searle, Chalmers, Kim, they claim that our minds are material, our consciousness.
Yes.
They're based on our physical brains, but what it produces is immaterial, this consciousness.
Well, by immaterial, I don't think it is. I don't think it is immaterial. That's the thing. Like, the sort of properties of our mind, it's still based upon material functionings, to the point where if we are having a mental problem, we can use chemicals to change that imbalance, to fix that problem. Like, there's no surprise that ingesting different chemicals will make your mind operate differently. Like, so we're getting really into the weeds here, but this idea that because a mental state isn't directly physical, it has to be supernatural, is ridiculous.
It is. I like a factory for an analogy on this one, because the production is an immaterial thing. Stuff gets produced, but it's all the interactions of the different parts and the robots and the laborers and so forth, and stuff gets produced. So the production is immaterial in that it's an emergent property of the entire correct functioning of the whole system, in the same way being conscious is the correct functioning of the entire system. But if you bomb the factory, then what happens to the production? It is a transcendent thing. It goes to factory heaven or fucking something.
And like my traffic analogy, like the traffic itself is not the physical thing. It isn't. It's just the entire system working, and that's what we consider the mind. It's the product of the entire system. It is the way the entire system is operating. But there's no reason to think that is somehow supernatural, and that there's something else that's not physical working in it. It is just, it's like sort of saying, hey, my computer is doing all this stuff and showing something on a screen. It must be some supernatural thing that is immaterial. No, it's all material, or all of it is material.
I mean,
because we really understand how. Sometimes I hate you, Ember. Sometimes. That's not true. I'm 100% lying.
Fucking hell, I need to stop that. I'm gonna get Dr. Tapioca weaseled right off the screen.
No, that's a lie. I never hated you. That's an absolute lie. No, you're right. It could be magic. Like, why can't we just say it's magic? Because at that point, our investigation into neurology becomes nonsensical. When you can show that it's magic, or show that it is somehow a god or a soul or something immaterial, then fine. But you've got to show that first, not say, hey, something isn't physical, therefore it's a god. No, because we know some things are conceptual.
So when we see the effects that our immaterial human minds can produce, like the beautiful music that Dan produces, designs with his mind, I think it's an analogous step when we see that sort of design in the universe to attribute that to a designer, possibly an image.
Yeah, the designer is, what was his name? Dan, the guy that designed it. That's the designer, champ. I don't.
We know how that works. Also, music. Emergent property, several notes in a row, created with an instrument performing in correct function and so forth. Therefore, music exists outside of space and time too. Yet, strangely enough, music only works when it's presented in a temporal format. If you take any piece of music and play all the notes at once, it just doesn't have the same effect,
Yeah, and sort of you can sort of hear music in your mind, but that's no reason to think that it's happening supernaturally somewhere. I don't know how you would demonstrate that. Like, do you have a ghost in your head with a trombone sitting there? I don't know how this is so
we found the Holy Ghost and he plays the
Holy Ghost. I knew it.
Material mind, just like Dan's immaterial mind designs beautiful music. When we see this universe, beautiful, fine-tuned for life, seems reasonable to conclude that some.
Yes, but if you give Dan material brain damage, he may no longer be able to produce that immaterial mind to produce the material music. So how does that work?
I just like the fact he just threw in an argument from beauty. Like, there's beautiful things. There must be what about, you know, the viruses and the cancers? And I mean, depending on your perspective, you might consider a volcano to be awe-inspiring, majestic, perhaps.
Right.
But the lava that destroys your village, maybe not so much. Like, there's a lot of horrible things too.
And why did God decide on a sloppy fart sound? Like, why? It's awful. Like, you know, like standing in an elevator and someone, you know, lets loose, and it's like, dude, why can't it be beautiful as well? It's almost like it's our subjective perspective on the thing that is making it beautiful or not beautiful. Just saying.
Yeah.
Something analogous to our minds produced it, just because we've never seen design come from any other source than an intelligent mind.
We've never seen design come from any other source than an intelligent mind. But you're begging the question, because you're automatically saying that natural things are designed, not a product of natural processes.
Well, you know,
so
complexity can be an indicator of design. So the way this argument usually gets posed when it's fully developed is, you know, any complex system requires a more complex explanation, a cause that is more complex than it is. And the reason they tend to skirt around making that full case is because that kind of implicates God as well. It makes them go to a special pleading when you say, okay, then the most complex thing must be this creator that you're positing. So how do you justify it? It also requires a more complex origin. Oh, well, it doesn't apply. It didn't begin to exist. Yeah,
exactly. Then they have to say, well, that didn't begin. Well, why can't we just say the universe is complex and that didn't begin to exist? Oh, no, there has to be a God not beginning to exist.
Well, a lot of it is perspective, just like the beauty thing. How do you perceive the volcano? Is it beautiful for its majestic power? Is it horribly ugly for the ash it leaves behind and the villages it eats? You know, it's very, very subjective. There is no absolute, this is beautiful, this is horrible.
Right.
All perspective. The same thing with
complexity.
No, shit. I went and derailed myself. I need to go get some ibuprofen. I will be back in a moment.
That's okay. That's all right. I'll continue on. You come back anytime you want. But I think the whole idea that we can just sort of appeal to, hey, complex things are designed, it's absolutely begging the question. There's complex things that don't appear to be designed. The weather's incredibly complex and has sort of a structure to it. It has patterns that it follows, and it's not designed. Unless you want to beg the question and say, hey, we know that's designed, which is essentially what he's doing. He's saying, hey, all the natural things around us, we know they're designed as well. No, we don't know they're designed. You're just assuming they're designed.
I don't see why we should think immaterial things can't produce physical effects. My mind is immaterial and it produces effects in the physical world.
I'm sorry. Is this man arguing that he's got a supernatural mind that creates his brain? That's so weird. Like, why is it then because if I have a, something producing something, I don't know why damaging that thing should change your mind. It's very, very strange. So if your mind is producing your brain and having this physical effect to produce your brain, it should be that you damage the brain and your mind should function just fine without it, because it's the thing that's producing the physical effect. But what we see is the opposite in reverse. We see the mind have damage occur to it when you damage the physical structure. This isn't hard to understand. Wow. I'm not sure how that would work.
My mind moves my body to pick something up. Dan's immaterial mind creates beautiful music. So,
well, sure, but we don't think that we don't think it's the supernatural mind moving it's your brain. We can track how the nerve signals and the signals to your arms work. It's not a case that we go, okay, well, your mind causes your arm to move and your brain's not. No. In fact, you sort of have almost a secondary brain, a nerve cluster in your back. And it's been shown that if you are burnt or a lot of pain input happens very fast, that nerve cluster can cause you to draw back your hand before the signal even gets to your brain. Your nerves can sometimes make you do things without your brain being involved at all, but your mind isn't involved. Like, your mind's not involved when you breathe, except when you think about it. And I've just made everybody think about it. So this manual and automatic taking over of your mind, taking over functionality and then releasing it to your brain, we understand how that works. There's autonomic functions and there's conscious functions of stuff. I don't. Are you getting any of this? Like, did you hear what he said?
And
he said
probably
we know
not.
that the mind can have physical effects, like the mind moves your arm to get something, and it's like, yeah, that isn't exactly how it's working there, champ.
Yeah, like there's a whole lot that's like birds building nests, right? Are they doing it because they consciously understand, advanced algebra and geometry and trigonometry and material science to understand that, which twigs can bear more weight? Or is it instinct? Like, is it really the mind doing it or the brain doing it?
Yeah, and sort of, I remember some Muslim guy brought up that baby beavers will automatically try and build dams, right? And that's like he was trying to say, hey, you have this mind from birth, you have knowledge from birth because they can build dams from birth. But what something I found out when looking into it was that if somebody, and they did research on this, if they played the sound of water running, the baby beavers, they would try to build the dam over the sound, even though there was no water there. So it is instinctive. It is an instinct to do that. They're not thinking about it and not deciding, hey, there's water, I need to build a dam. So they don't have a knowledge of it. They're just compelled to do it because it's part of their instinct. Just like if you burn yourself, you're going to jerk your hand away without even thinking about it. Your mind is not involved. And we know this because that signal actually comes from your back. Like, the signal to jerk your hand away if you're badly burnt will actually come from the direct nerve cluster in your back, which is wild. Like, this whole question of free will, we actually have way less free will. Even if you grant that, we have way less than we think we do.
Oh, goodness, yeah. Like Russian roulette. If you had real free will, nobody should ever hesitate to pull the trigger if they've decided that's what they want to do. And yet, every time, every player, except, the most out of their gourd ones, they hesitate. And the more the game goes on, the more the hesitation, because they have to override several layers of instinct for self-preservation in order to force themselves to pull the trigger. You don't have real free will. You can make decisions within certain prescribed parameters, but your instinct controls so much of what you do. Generally, we're fine with it because it keeps us alive and we approve. But sometimes it gets in the way. Skydivers, you have to overcome the same sort of thing in order to make yourself step out of the plane.
Yeah. And it gets even weirder because things like when you're starving, you will actually send a chemical to override the part of your brain that sees some food or, your own species as disgusting. You will start to override that piece of sort of, well, I don't want to eat this when you're hungry enough. And it will actually override it. And then you get even weirder, where your gut bacteria can transmit signals that we've actually shown that your gut bacteria can influence your mental state and make you depressed and things like that if they're not functioning well. Like, it's wild. That's not even us. That's another organism with completely different DNA sending signals to us that they're not happy. And because we need them, they affect our mental state. That is wild. Like, just wild. I find it absolutely fascinating that we consider ourselves absolutely in the driving seat. And as it turns out, you know, we've got a finger on the wheel and all this stuff is happening over here that we're totally unaware of. You know, like, we really have just not only just not the control, but we don't even have the main control that we think we do, which is fascinating. And being aware of this, you know, is really empowering, because we can sort of, you know, evaluate that and go, well, why did I do this? I just find it really interesting that all of these systems can, you know, override us completely. Just say, no, you aren't in charge here, and override us. I find it wild.
Mm-hmm.
Things can be created by sheer thought, and we're just proposing that God can create a physical universe with sheer thought, like we can create music. We might not know exactly how the immaterial interacts with the physical, but I don't see why it couldn't.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to move that notepad on my desk with my mind. Oh, can't do it. I don't have the force.
You didn't try hard enough. So
there is no try. You either do or you do not. There is no try.
As any good Jedi can tell us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So on today's Live from the Hive, one of the subsections that Bree does had to do with pyrokinesis, and one of the creators that she found actually has all the kinesises, and he will teach you how it's done.
Pyrokinesis. Oh,
yep.
Damn.
Biokinesis and aerokinesis
no. It's the Avatar. That's what it is. It's
exactly. He can do all the bending.
Wow.
So clearly it is possible to do, you know, tangible things with mental energy. And
yeah,
I mean,
until you're in the studio with James Randi, apparently. And then, you know, the James Randi will make you demonstrate it without any of, you know, your gimmicks around. And then suddenly the power fails for some reason. We don't know why.
God just didn't want you to see behind the curtain.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. You know, this is the thing. Like, if you're unfamiliar, James Randi Foundation was a foundation by an ex-magician, James Randi, who basically spent his life debunking all of these supernatural claims. And he would give £1 million. I think it closed up recently, but it was going for a fair while, to anyone that could demonstrate anything supernatural under scientific conditions. Right. And it is incredible the amount of people that didn't bother to try and get $1 million, except they certainly do have psychic powers. Trust me, bro. Or two, that attempted and completely failed when he put the conditions, or their power just didn't work for some reason. He was the one that showed that Uri Geller, this famous spoon bending guy, was an absolute fraud, because as soon as he was put under scientific observation and conditions, he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it.
Well, you know, the same thing happened to Jesus, and, you know,
yeah.
Look what happened to him.
Look, you know, 3 out of 10 men will experience performance anxiety. Never mind.
We don't see God directly, as he pointed out, but we see effects that point to God. There's a lot of things that we don't see directly, but we infer by seeing their effects.
Computer guy did get the no. That was a joke. That was a joke. That was 100% an April Fool's joke. Majestic P-Beck, look it up. It 100% was a joke. April Fool's. But it's amazing how many people believed it.
For example, I don't see your minds. I don't see your immaterial minds out there, but based on the effects that are producing, you moving around, talking, I infer that, in fact, you do have minds.
Yeah, but that seems dependent on a very material brain. You know, that's like saying, well, I'm not seeing the traffic out there, but I know that traffic, you know, so it's an immaterial. dude, what are you talking about?
It's just a coincidence that traffic depends on material cars. It would still be traffic even without cars, because...
Well, I don't see why an immaterial traffic couldn't produce material cars. Is that what we're supposed to believe? That the emergent property is the thing creating the physical things that are producing? This is
so
ridiculous.
There is a little bit of discussion in physics. It's not taken super seriously, but
Right.
there's this idea that gravity pre-exists the collection of matter, that there's divots in time space, and because those divots are there, that's where matter tends to accumulate in an amount equal to the size of the dent. And that's why some things are some sizes and some things are other things, because once the dent is full of matter, it no longer needs to accumulate any more matter. So the matter goes somewhere else. So the gravity is creating the massive body that happens to neatly fit within the gravity well.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
I don't know about
Same
that
sort of thing. There already is a traffic, and it just accumulates the proper amount of cars to fulfill the degree of traffic that it is.
Yeah.
So another example, we don't observe historical events directly either, but we infer what happened in history from the effects and the evidence that's left behind.
So do you think history is supernatural? What is this guy on? We don't see historical events, but they exist. Well, they happened at one point, but we don't think they're supernatural. What is this guy talking about? Like, again, history is conceptual. It's what we think happened. Like, yeah, there was a physical event there, and that's caused us to come up with this history. It's a concept of, what we think happened, but it's not a thing. It doesn't exist like in the real world. It just exists conceptually. Holy crap.
That's still, it hurts my brain on a couple of different levels. One, because the definition of what makes a thing history is when we started writing shit down.
Yeah.
There are historical events in prehistory. They're in prehistory because it's pre-writing.
Do you know that? Were you there?
Exactly. So that's the entire point of history, is that it is documented events that people made note of when the thing happened. Like,
this guy's terrible.
Wow.
He's absolutely terrible. I'm going to rescind my, Andrew Lloyd Webber can't do anything wrong. It's he sucks.
So if there is an immaterial being like God, we would imagine that it would leave evidence behind, such like a contingent universe that's finely tuned for life. I do want to talk about,
actual evidence. If there were an immaterial God, maybe he would leave, evidence around instead of just shit you can bend to try to pretend it points in his vague direction.
Yep.
Holy shit.
Diverse.
Like, we can come up with evidence for the dinosaurs, but God can't give us a similar amount of evidence for himself.
Ooh, what if we found God bones?
Oh, that would be cool. What if we found frost giant bones and we know that Odin's true because of it? How about that?
What if we have found frost giant bones, but we've miscatalogued them as dinosaur bones because we just go, oh, it's a big bone. It must have been a fucking lizard or something.
What if we did find giant bones and the Smithsonian destroyed them because it doesn't want people to know the truth about Odin? You ever think about that?
Where's Witsit when you need him?
Yeah, right.
Here. I think that's a very good conversation. I'm glad he brought that up. There's a lot of rich literature. So let me try to, as much as I can in my 3 minutes, talk about the multiverse. It seems a bit of a stretch in an attempt to dismiss the idea of one unobservable being who designed the universe to propose an infinite number of unobservable universes.
Whoa. We're dismissing the possibility. It doesn't seem fitting to dismiss an innumerable quantity of undetectable beings. to say that there's just one undetectable being. Like, what do you mean, my guy?
Why? Like, so a possible infinitely powerful being, it's wrong to dismiss, but finite possible universes, it's right to dismiss that out of hand. Why? I don't get that. I don't understand. Who's making these rules? Ref, I need...
Read in the comments has got it. If the frost giants were made entirely of water, the oceans are the evidence of their graveyard.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
where the flood came from.
There you go. It all makes sense now. It all makes sense.
Noah didn't hear from God. He heard from Odin saying, I'm going to kill all them frost giants, so you should build a big-ass boat.
That makes so much more sense. Except that if it was Odin, he should have had to contend with Jormungandr, the world serpent in the ocean. But never mind. That's aside the point. Maybe that's... Details.
Being seems a much more plausible explanation than an infinite amount of universes.
Why?
First, I think there's more evidence for God than there is for...
Whoa. There wouldn't necessarily... We're not positing an infinite number of universes. We don't know. There could be... I mean, there's versions of the Big Bang Theory that posit there is one other universe. It's this universe, but where antimatter is dominant and time is running in the other direction.
Yeah, the arrow of time is pointed in the opposite direction. Yeah.
So we could have an alternate universe and just have one, or there could be some type of harmonic resonance effect, like we see with planetary formation. As you know, Dr. Tapioca Weasel demonstrated, some of his PhD level work was in why do planets seem to form in certain areas around their stars, because there's a certain resonance to their gravitational influence on each other, and so it's a whole big thing. If things form with resonances relative to each other in a greater emergent system, it seems perfectly plausible that the same thing would apply to universes in whatever universe creating medium there might be. And so there's an unknown number, but it could very well be finite. We just have no idea what that number is.
Yeah, good point. Really good point. Yeah, that absolutely. Why does it have to be infinite? But even if it is infinite, why are we excluding that and including an infinite God? Either infinite things exist or don't exist. You can't say, well, because God's infinite, that's fine. But because there's an infinite number of these things, that's not fine. Why?
Because we don't like it.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot.
It hurts our immaterial and infinite brains.
But even if there is a multiverse, it still would require a first cause, unless we're willing to accept an act.
How do you know?
I mean, is there anything in the observable universe that has a single first cause? Like we're compiling it all together and saying, well, the whole thing must have a first cause. Does it though? Because I mean, our existences, it takes two parents usually to produce one new human. I mean, you might have a single carpenter build a chair, but you need the raw materials for that, which means you're relying on the tree to be produced. Again, you often by sexual reproduction, and therefore two creators of that, and a whole chain of contingency going back to some star blowing up ages ago. There is never a single finite cause for anything. So why would that apply to the universe collectively?
I don't know, because God.
Actual infinite regress of causes. A multiverse would still seem to require fine-tuning too. That is, a universe factory that's producing fine-tuned universes seems itself to require design.
I mean, why not? Maybe that's what God is. Maybe God is a factory that just churns out universes or simulations, if you want to go that direction. You know, the holographic universe made of photons and force fields. Maybe there's a server somewhere where an
Mhm.
AI just keeps churning out potentially viable universes in order to generate the optimum design for whatever the top priority value is.
Yes, and I have a really good argument that we're living in a simulation. And that is the United States now has a Doge department.
Fucking hell. We live in a
Thank you.
cartoon.
That is my bulletproof argument that this must be a simulation, because seriously, this cannot be real life.
It can't be
can't
real.
be, right? Like, I am of course joking, but wow. Like seriously, you guys have a Doge department. Like, it's just this can't be real. Like, seriously.
Problem, though, with a multiverse explanation or multiverse objection is that it proves too much. It's like a multiverse of the gaps. You can explain anything away with a multiverse objection.
No, you can't explain anything away. You just have a alternative hypothesis, because what he's trying to do is do a deductive argument smuggled in as abductive, right? So we went through the three types. A deductive argument is when you take away suspects until you get the person who committed the crime. Abductive is saying, hey, it's probable that this is the person. So he's trying to say no other possibility fits, basically. He's trying to say, hey, we've eliminated every other possibility. But we say, hey, but it could be a multiverse. There's another possibility. So now he's trying to say, hey, you can't use multiverse. I have to go back to my deductive argument, because there's no way he can actually eliminate all possibilities of how the universe is. He can't do it. So, but, you know.
Well, even that is a bit of a smokescreen, because he's using that to avoid having to give us a plausible reason why his proposed solution should even be considered. Because we're saying we don't see why that should be considered. And he's saying, well, I mean, you're talking about multiverse. You're still not answering the key question. Why should we consider your thing? Why should we not consider universe creating pixies, but consider your thing? Why should we not consider Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, but we should consider your thing? In what way is your thing beyond the threshold of plausibility and these other things are not? Because I'm not seeing a difference.
Right. And so the whole idea of this, you know, multiverse of the gaps, we're not using that to say, well, you don't know what it is, or you don't know for sure that it's God. You've only got an abductive argument. We're going to say we know it's the multiverse. What we're saying is that you're claiming it must be God because none of the other possibilities fit. How did you determine that it wasn't multiverse? That's what we're doing. We're saying, hey, you're posing a dichotomy. Well, that's not a dichotomy. You're proposing a deductive argument. We know that it was God because it couldn't have been anything else. And we're saying, why not multiverse? And you're saying, well, no, that's multiverse of the gaps. No, it isn't. It is simply giving you an alternative hypothesis to show that you have not deduced a God from your arguments. That's it. Crikey.
For example, let's say hypothetically that every single day the clouds formed a message all around the world, every country, the clouds formed a message in the sky that says, here I am God, believe that I exist.
Okay, so why don't we get this? Right? If that happened all around the world, it would be some pretty compelling evidence. Yeah, some people might not believe it, but wouldn't that be compelling evidence, Ember? You know?
It'd be a good start.
It'd be a good start. Now, we'd have to find out if whether, you know, someone with a plane and a lot of determination did that, you know, like, because you can do cloud seeding. But, you know, it would be a good start. It would be something that is not just someone saying, hey, I had a feel, and that feel felt good, and therefore it must have been a God, because look at the trees. That's essentially what we get. Writing in the sky would be an improvement. But no, we never get these examples, ever.
Let's say the clouds form that every day in the sky, different languages all around the world. Well, if that happened, with the multiverse objection, we can just say, well, you know, if there was an infinite amount of universes, then certainly everything that could happen must happen in one of those universes, and we just happen to be in the universe where that happens. You see what I'm saying? The multiverse objection is just too strong. It would dismiss any sort of potential.
Oh,
Your argument is
irony.
too strong.
Well, it's more than that. The irony is that he uses God for exactly the same thing, right? You could explain anything with a God, literally anything. Why is it that this evolution exists? Oh, it was God. Why is it that we only say, well, it's God hiding?
Your argument is invalid because I can't defeat it.
Yeah.
Fuck me sideways.
Well, it's almost like unfalsifiable things can never be disproven, so it's not really worth considering them. Right?
Oh, I can't fucking breathe. Your argument it's catastrophic to my case. Break it from the record, Judge.
Yeah.
Wow.
What a guy.
Evidence for God or anything like that. So I think the multiverse objection just accomplishes too much.
Your multiverse objection has as much evidence of my God as my God, and I can't defeat it. I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. Which is why atheists don't necessarily believe that it had to be a multiverse.
No,
Wow.
yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm honestly not a fan. I mean, I like the idea as a sci-fi concept or something, but because it's unfalsifiable, I don't bring it into my understanding of the science.
Unless the theist says it had to be a God because of fine tuning, and you go, well, there's an alternative. And they say, but I can't prove that's wrong. Now you know how we feel.
Multiverse is our God.
Last thing I want to touch
obviously. All hail multiverse.
on is this issue of morality. I hope you understand that I'm not claiming that atheists can't be moral people. They can. I'm not claiming that atheists can't know morality. No.
Oh, how very generous of you.
Oh, we're not we're degenerates with reprobate minds.
Reprobate minds. Yeah. That's the one. Reprobate minds. But we can be moral.
They can know moral truth. That's not my argument at all. The argument that I'm making is more metaphysical, metaethical, if you will. And that is, if there are these objective moral truths, like there are objective mathematical truths, where do these truths come from? What's the best explanation of how there can be objective moral truths? And there's theories out there.
Can you provide an example of one objective moral truth? One thing that is objectively, absolutely, universally, morally true.
And how do you demonstrate that that is in fact independent of anybody's stance? I don't know how he would do that.
I mean, I don't have one, but that's just an argument from incredulity on my part. But I'd like to see him demonstrate even just one.
Well, usually they'll go to something, and the debaters that I usually engage with go to something really shocking, like the abuse of a child for fun or something, right? And the whole point is that even if everybody in the world agreed that's immoral, it still doesn't show that it's objectively immoral, right? You've got to show, like, for instance, if you have a rock, that rock is doesn't hinge on anybody's mind. It doesn't matter what my stance is about it. It still is there and exists. That's objective. But even if everybody agrees that ice cream is nice, in the world agrees on that this brand of ice cream is really nice, that doesn't make it objective. It just means everyone agrees on it. That's all. Like, we've got to be really serious about what objective actually means, because it means independent from anybody's stance on it, including a god's.
That I interact with over here, they propose Platonic ideas, brute ethical facts of the universe, that they're just out there in a Platonic sense. I disagree with that. I think God is a better explanation. I propose, that's my book coming out is this fall that Eric Wielenberg is endorsing. I propose that the Trinity is the best source of, or the best explanation.
Oh, good. Another incoherent concept. I love it. Buy my DVDs.
And thank you, to our volunteers, the card carrying members of Free Flow. They carry.
Is that it? Are they on to
if
questions?
free will is an illusion, how?
Oh no, yeah, they're on to questions.
Yeah, so that's why we edited it originally, and this one is my bad. I misplaced the edited version.
That's
but they
fine.
they did the rebuttals. And then the Q&A, and then at the end they do their closing.
Okay. They did the closing at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's hear the closing. I don't know where the closing is.
Oh, let me see if I can find it. Let's see. Rebuttal, audience questions. Closing statement starts around an hour 22.
Oh, I just reached it.
Haha.
All right.
I like Adam. He's smart. He's educated. He's articulate. And I'm from what I know about
and
him,
wrong.
man, I think we could be friends, maybe, unless you believe in hell.
Do you want
to
be my buddy?
There's a real hell where I'm going to be tortured forever because of my choice, and you're going to be rewarded in heaven. I don't think we would ever be best friends, if that's what you think about me. But I think people should be judged by their actions, no matter what they say. If they want to believe.
I had a really weird question. I was watching Emma Thorne, and one of the questions that was asked was sort of that she was going through questions that atheists asked, and one of them was, would Christianity be more fair or palatable to you if annihilationism was true? The idea that all of the unbelievers, all of the heretics and atheists were just, basically what we think when you die anyway, you just cease to exist kind of thing, would that be better or more fair? And I'm thinking it's not really more fair. You know what I mean? How would that be more fair? You might say it's less horrific, more moral, I guess, more humane, I guess you could say. But I wouldn't say it's more fair because you're still making the distinction on whether someone believes or not. But it was an interesting question. Would it be more palatable? I don't think it has appeal for me. It doesn't make Christianity more or less appealing because, the truth or falsity of it isn't on how humane God is. It's on whether there is justification to believe it. I think. What do you think about that?
I was my thoughts were going in a slightly different direction because I was listening to Emma Thorne's video today with the TikTok questions after I dropped my son off. Yeah. And I was thinking, well, from a believer's perspective, what makes hell is the absence of the presence of God. It's not necessarily the torture and the fire. It's the lack of God that makes it torturous. So it's a lack of the ultimate good, which is basically what we experience here. And I'm like, in the context of the theodicies and shit, it actually doesn't sound half bad. It's this conceptualizing of the eternal positive torture rather than a negative good thing. It's like saying, well, ice cream is the ultimate objective positive experience you can have in life. So a life without ice cream is torture, but you can have a perfectly fine life with no ice cream in it.
Right. Yeah, I that's not the threat that you think it is, especially if it's Yahweh in the Old Testament, because he seemed like a bit of a dick, to be honest with you, like a complete a-hole. So, eternity without that dude is totally fine by me. As Alex pointed out, if heaven's where the insufferable homophobes go, send my ass to hell. Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think we should base what we think is true on, how good or bad it is for us personally. I think that's a real mistake. So I don't think it changes, so annihilationism, oh, well, I won't burn in hell. That's, I don't believe it anyway. So why would I care? It's sort of, why would I care that Kim Jong-un isn't going to torture me eternally? He's just going to, put a bullet in my head. Well, why, why would I base my beliefs of what is true or not on, you know, the severity of punishment if I don't believe?
Yeah, it's like
That seems weird.
in Mormonism. It's been a couple of years since I was really looking into Mormon stuff, but if I recall correctly, they don't have hell if you don't get to hang out with God the Father and his minions. You
Yeah.
get banished to the outer darkness, and it's
Yes.
basically oblivion. You just stop existing, you know?
Mhm.
And I mean,
Yeah.
does that, because it's less horrific, does that make Mormonism more true than mainline Christianity?
No, because we don't base what we believe on consequences. We base it on evidence and justification for those beliefs, not the consequences of believing things. Or at least I do. I mean, I can't speak.
Yeah, I mean, I find some aspects of the consequential side of Mormonism somewhat more compelling than mainline Christianity.
Mhm.
Like, for example, you get to be Yahweh of your own planet, which means you can have all the fucking ice cream or chocolate or garlic
Ooh,
bread, whatever it is you're into, because
right.
you're the god there.
Nice.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm going to choose the religion where I get to be the god. Who cares if some dude made it up? Like, what is that? Oh dear.
Believe in elves. They want to believe in Allah. Fine, it's a free world. But people should be judged by their actions. And most Christians, most theists are good people. I think
Yeah.
just by human nature. I think, and just like most atheists and agnostics, we're basically good people with a few fringe people on the edge that are causing a lot of problems in every group. There's some bad Christians and there's some bad atheists in the world. So my criticisms of theism are not directed at you, Adam. So, and I think you understand that. You mentioned the prime mover. You said this prime mover, or whatever you call it, the cause outside of the Big Bang, or whatever however the word you use it. You said this being has to be incredibly powerful. You said, but power is work over time. Power is a physical, natural thing. How can an immaterial being who doesn't exist in space or time, how can it have power? What would power even mean to a being? You only would say he's all powerful if you're comparing it to something else, like he created a puny universe that way he can say, look how powerful I am. It doesn't mean anything at all. So you're smuggling concepts into your premises that don't belong there. And it amounts almost.
Well, yeah, he's right, and that's how power is defined scientifically. Is no, well, actually, that's how energy is defined scientifically. Is work over time. That's what energy is. I think power is kind of different. That is sort of slightly different. That's any instance of energy, I believe. I could have that wrong. Yeah, double check me, Ems. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But
Okay, so in physics, according to the quick Googles, yeah, the formula is power equals work over time.
Okay.
Wikipedia says power is the amount of energy transferred or converted per unit of time.
Right.
Power, for example, can be measured in watts, for instance.
Yes. Yes, I'm not sure they're using a physical one, but I see his point. You know, like if you want to go for a scientific definition, then power is it's a unit of work. So what's energy then? I thought, yeah, maybe I've got it wrong.
Energy is like the I'm gonna fuck it up. It's
Oh,
the
energy is the
potential or
ability
capacity to do work.
Yeah, the ability to do work with the ability to exert a force causing the displacement of an object. So that is what energy is. Okay. No, that's fair. I had those two backwards. Which is fair enough. I'm glad we checked that. So yeah, he's got a point. Like if you want to use a different definition of power, then you've got to show that what that definition is and how you actually measure it to know that it is powerful. And I think that what he's saying is you've got to measure it against other things because you're giving a relative term, right? Powerful is only relative to other things. Like you can say the ant is powerful, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's only powerful in comparison to other insects its size or something of relative size. Like it's not powerful compared to a human, right? So you've got to, in some way, show how you made this distinction. And so I think he's got a point. It's kind of a little splitting hairs, but I've got no problem with that. He's kind of just nailing him on the scientific terms, which is always good to see. Always good to see. Yeah.
Amounts to begging the question. And again, I do think moral truths can be objectively justified.
Yes.
I wouldn't say it in the way a lot of philosophers say, that there exist objective moral truths, because they don't. And the brain is a functioning organism. As I said earlier, when the mind is the function of an organism. And when the brain dies, the mind is gone. And you're talking about the word mind. This audience has minds that you can infer. A mind isn't a thing. You can infer that they have brains that are functioning to some degree or another. I think in this audience,
Yeah, that is not the way to win a debate, is just insult the audience to some degree or another. Awesome.
I mean,
pretty high level of.
If you manage to walk into the room, it's fair to infer your brain is functioning to some degree.
Oh, yeah, you could definitely infer that, yes.
Functioning. But you're using the word mind as if it were a thing. You're committing that reification mistake.
Yes.
And therefore, here are these things that are in the universe that need some justification. These are just labels for the way things function, just like digestion or circulation of the heart.
Right.
When the body dies, where does the circulation go? We don't ask that question. It's a dumb question. And the same thing with minds. Where does the mind go or the soul go? That's a dumb question. It's only a biological organism that has a physical, material functioning brain that produces what we would label as a mind. And for you to take that and then jump to something transcendent.
That's a really good example. Like, where does my digestion go? It's a dumb
I really
thing
like
to say.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is fantastic, because it's true. All digestion is the emergent property of your digestive system working. That's all it is. It's not a thing in and of itself. So our consciousness, our mind, it's the description given to the emergent processes that come out of our brain. It's not a thing by itself that floats somewhere. And this is what we talk about with metaphysics. Like, when we talk about these concepts, we're talking metaphysics, not supernatural. Okay, it's not a supernatural thing. So, I love what the examples that you've been given here. Digestion, that is a beautiful example, because I can say, hey, I know all of the audience, I can infer that they have digestion. Why can we do that? Because they're humans that currently are not dead.
Their biology seems to be functioning within acceptable parameters.
Some of them may have poor digestion, some of them may have better digestion, but we can infer that with people's minds as well. So I love this. When I die, where does my digestion go? It doesn't go anywhere. Like, it just stops.
Is a huge category mistake. So I guess I would just ask, in light of the 6 lacks or absences that I gave tonight, did Adam connect the dots? Did he do a good enough job of filling those gaps? And I don't think he did. I'm still not convinced. I'd be open to being convinced, but for now, for this reason, and we didn't even get to talk about the problem of evil, do we?
Nope.
Maybe another debate. We could do that.
Well, in fairness, he said, "Oh, well, I'm not talking about the Christian God. I'm talking about any God that may possibly be out there." So you would hope that a Christian would address the problem of evil, but they seem like as soon as a problem of evil comes up, they want to talk about some general vague God out there, not the Christian one. So, it's kind of this Mott and Bailey thing where they retreat to the safer, well, just some God. I'm not suggesting which God, even though I'm Christian. You have talked about the Bible, suggested the Trinity, loaded all of these Christian terms into it. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just some God. Could be any God.
It's so cowardly too. Like, I mean, I get that Dan let him get away with it, because otherwise, if you go Christianity, you have to talk about the problem of evil.
Right.
If you go with general theism, you can just dodge the subject, and that's why they do that. But I don't know. Maybe it's just I get feisty in these sorts of conversations. I'd be like, what does the Bible say about he who denies me? Deny me here, and I will deny you before the Father. So what are you doing, Lloyd Webber? What are you doing? Our Jesus is going to deny you, my guy. He told you what you need to do, and you're not doing it.
Well, don't forget they can always just beg for forgiveness, and then it's fine.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's Matthew 10:33. But whoever denies me before men, I will I also will deny before my Father who is in heaven. Okay. No, that's fair. That's fair.
So thank you. This has been a lot of fun tonight.
That's why St. Peter has to guard the gates, you know.
Oh, really?
Because
he denied.
Because he
Jesus.
denied Jesus in front of the
Once
Romans.
again, I want to.
So, like
Ooh.
Moses could not enter the Holy Land, Peter cannot enter the kingdom. He's stuck
Wow.
outside the gate.
Wow. Like a hobo outside heaven. That's terrible. That's awful.
Mm-hmm. But he loves Jesus so much, so he's being helpful and he's minding the guest list or something. But yeah, that's the whole thing. That's why he's out there.
Okay. I never heard that before. I had no idea.
Catholic lore is just full of interesting things.
Yeah, that's wild.
Thank David and Andy. For
Did you know there was a dog-headed saint?
No.
Yeah, there was
that Saint Pappus of
Saint, I think it was
Canania?
I forget if it was Christopher or Anthony, but there was a whole thing in the Eastern Orthodox Church, especially. I think it was another one of Bree's shows.
It was Saint Christopher.
Yeah, but he was a dog-headed dude. Apparently, he prayed God would take away some lustful temptation, and God just poofed his head into a hound dog.
That's like a monkey's paw kind of thing, right there.
It's like, okay. And he was drawn that way for hundreds and hundreds of years until the what's now the Russian Orthodox Church was kind of converting into a state religion sort of thing. And they were like, we need to get rid of all this fan fiction crap. So, Christopher needs to be like a normal person now.
Okay. Wow. That's interesting.
Friends, I know this is your conference, but I've been very blessed to be here, and I've enjoyed hanging out with you guys last night and today as well. I want to thank Dan for having this conversation with me. We recognize that most people don't change their mind in these sort of debates. Sometimes they're just done for entertainment value, but I think they can be helpful in this regard. I think they can be an introduction to a lot of folks to these topics so that you can dive down.
They're a great demonstration of how shitty one side's arguments often are.
Yeah.
Standing with books and YouTube videos and conversations. And I hope that we've modeled how you can disagree vehemently on important issues while being friendly. I think you would agree with me that seems to have been lost in our culture right now.
Yeah, and if you could just tell that to the Christians, I would really appreciate it, because every time you say, I don't believe in your imaginary friend, they freak out. And I'm kind of baffled as to why.
As a person who's been on the outside for pretty much all my life, it never made sense to me that a person can grow up being raised with all these superstitious things, and then you hit age 6-ish and you find out Santa's not real, and age 7-ish, oh, the Easter Bunny's not real either, and age 10-ish, the Tooth Fairy's not real either. Is any of this shit real? Oh, well, God's real though. Really? Because I have evidence for Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy, and they're fake. Where's the better evidence for this fucking wizard and this undead carpenter ghost who wants to live inside you? What the fuck do you mean that one's real though?
And it's weird when you get accused of wanting, not believing in God because you want to look cool and stuff. It's so weird. It's so strange. You're like, what about that makes me cool? I don't understand. Have you met me? I don't. Why does that make
It's a diagnostic of an emergent property. The factor itself doesn't make you cool, but other characteristics that often come along with it, like critical thinking, for example, that can make you cool. An interest in science, that axiomatically makes a person cool, because by being interested in science, you tend to accumulate all sorts of fascinating facts, which you can then present at parties.
I don't know. I mean, Majestic Beck, I was totally fooled by my parents, 100%. They basically took took the cookies away by using a neighbor or something and put the presents there while we're out. So I 100% believed it. And like, as a person on the spectrum, I believe things when they're told to me. I just, that's what I was like when I was younger. It took me a long time to find out. So I 100% believed it. I won't lie. It definitely believed it up to a certain age. And then I was like, wait, people are telling me this isn't real. It it's a shock to the system, and there's no reason for it. Like, what is so bad about your parents giving you gifts that it's got to come from Santa Claus? Like, what? The kid doesn't care. They don't care.
It struck me as awfully strange too. Like, it seemed to me that gift giving on holidays, birthdays, Christmas, some other special occasions, was an expression of love. Right?
Yeah.
Like your parents give you a toy because they want you to be happy. Your grandparents give you socks because they want you to be healthy. They want warm feet in the winter, know?
Right. Yeah.
It's an expression of care. So when Santa gives you something, it's taking someone else's expression of love and ascribing it to something that doesn't exist there.
Yeah.
And it's very strange to me.
It's a very strange custom, right? It's very, very weird. I don't get it. If I had kids, I would never tell them that any of that stuff is true. I would just say, hey, we give you gifts on Christmas because we really love you, and leave it at that. Like, we don't. It's so weird. Humans are weird. I just want to say that right now. Humans are freaking strange.
It's true.
Let's shut Facebook off. Let's shut Twitter off and just go out to coffee and just have these conversations and know that we're going to disagree, but still love each other in the midst of that. In this debate, I've argued for mere theism.
Why don't we talk about something else then? Why don't we go out to coffee and, discuss how we're going to help homeless people? Or how we're going to put on the biggest, most elaborate Memorial Day parade just to make our community members happy and feel connected as one group who can work together to face the challenges of a dynamic future. Or, something that would actually make the world better. I don't know. I'm
have
silly.
A discussion about science and the revolutions we've had in the field of AI technology and what all of that means for us in the future. What does the Bible tell us about how we ought to proceed with AI? What's it going to tell us? And how does your religion cope with whether we ought to or ought not to engage in asteroid mining? It's got nothing to say. It all depends on your interpretation from it, which gives no consistency whatsoever.
Well, the Bible gives humanity dominion over this world.
Right.
So by implication, the asteroids, those are for God. It is sacrilegious.
Oh.
I mean, even mining the moon would be sacrilegious because that belongs to God.
I guess Europa and Titan are out, then we're not allowed to go with there either.
Right. Be fruitful and multiply, but stay on your rock, you damn bald monkeys who love explosions.
Never. We will see how far we can go. Maybe it's for nothing. Maybe it'll be everything. We'll see how far we can go. Because that's what humans have always done. We have had Vikings jump in a boat and go out when people say it's certain death just to see how far they can go.
It's what we were talking about with challenges earlier. Most of what we do is creating our own challenges. Even whether you believe in a God or not, you're constantly ascribing your own purpose to life. You're saying, I'm going to be an explorer. I'm going to build that boat and sail out there and see if there's an island made of volcanoes next to another one made of glaciers. It'll be fucking amazing. Or you say, oh, you think we can't get to the moon within this decade? Hold my beer, bitches. We don't have to do those things, but we're saying, challenge accepted. I bet you we can.
We do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Grayson said that with a really bad accent last night your time. So thanks, Grayson. What a guy.
The question isn't about whether or not we like God. Many times I don't like God. The question is not about whether we agree with God. Sometimes I don't agree with what God does. And this debate isn't about whether or not we fully understand God. One of the things that Dan mentioned is you have...
Did he just judge God? Or at least imply that he is in a position to judge God? A God he believes is real?
Well, just saying that you don't like God upon occasion, I don't think that's necessarily judging him. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, he said,
maybe.
I don't approve of what God does.
Well, he said,
I don't believe
understand.
God is asking for your approval.
Well, no, I don't think he is either. You know, but like, here's the thing. It's basically just saying it's whether God exists or not. But nothing you've said actually goes to evidence for a God to exist. Like, I don't know why he's telling the audience this, because it's mostly atheists, and they don't think that's the question either. No atheist is sitting there going, oh, well, is it a case of whether we like or dislike God? No one's doing that. Because whether or not he exists is irrelevant to whether we like or dislike the character of this alleged person or this alleged agent. No one is actually... You know, so the only person that relates to is Christians.
But, you know, it's simply basic logic that if you can imagine the most likable divine being, then it would be superior to one that you like less. Therefore, it's more likely to be real.
Okay, that doesn't follow. But
no,
sure.
no, I mean,
it really doesn't.
That whole argument, it's Anselm, friggin' Anselm.
Yep.
If you can imagine the best possible being, and what would make it even better is if it were real. It just blows my mind that the people who argue that don't realize how self-defeating it is. It's saying that things that exist are better than the greatest possible thing you can imagine, because by existing, they are superior to that greater thing, that otherwise greater thing that you can imagine. Anselm's argument is saying we're better than the gods we made up because we actually exist.
Well, it's actually if it exists in some possible world, right? So if a god
that gets into a whole other thing.
Well, that's the reification again. It's sort of saying that some possible world is actually a thing. And whereas, you know, I would say that when we say some possible world, we're really talking about something conceptual again. Like, I can imagine a possible world where my coffee cup is on the other side, but that doesn't mean that exists somewhere. Like, it's just a concept.
Yeah, it's multiple layers of fallacy, because first of all, you've got that whole equivocation on possible. Like, when we say possible, we mean it's not impossible for reasons of logic, which isn't the same as it's just as likely to exist as our universe.
Right.
It's all, you know, it's a very different thing. But also there's that layer of cherry picking after a fashion. It's saying, well, you know, if God could exist in some possible world and he's a maximal being, therefore he must exist in all possible worlds. The same logic works the other way around. If there's some possible world where that God does not exist, then by the same reasoning, he cannot exist in all possible worlds, and because there's a possible world he doesn't exist in, so he cannot exist in all possible worlds, and therefore doesn't exist in the real world. Now what?
Yeah. And that's basically it. It's the contrary point which shows it's ad absurdum. It's the contrary point that shows that it doesn't work, because those two things are in contradiction, so the argument falls apart.
It just means we don't fully understand God yet. Scientists disagree with each other about their scientific theories all the time. It doesn't mean their theory isn't true. It's just that they haven't got it figured out yet, and they're still working on it.
You've had 2,000 years. I mean, I think we've got a lot of things pretty well figured out in 100 years, much less 2,000 years. So a question I'd like to ask is, what knowledge of the world around us has God given to us over the last 2,000 years? What has these religions, through an act of God, discovered about the world around us and how it works? Nothing. Literally nothing. We've never had any kind of, someone's come with an insight of how quarks work or how computers work, anything coming from a god. Nothing. Zero, zip, zilch. No priest has said, oh, suddenly I understand how, Newtonian physics is incorrect and here is my theory of relativity. It doesn't happen. It's the people doing science that do that. So it's what I find weird is these people that think they have a direct line to a being that knows everything about everything, and they can't tell us anything new about the universe around us.
Or even the best. So this was the thing. My most recent video is addressing Ray Comfort's 20 science facts in the Bible. And one of the things that came up is, Ray likes to make this argument that, the Exodus or Leviticus tells you to wash your hands under running water. Well, clearly God knew about germs and yada, yada, yada. But that's a great example. Boiling water works even better for removing germs, and boiling water is a thing they could do at the time.
Right.
So if that running water thing is advice from God, cool. God is an inferior physician. Not only did he not warn them about germs, but he didn't give them the best available solution at the time, even not even revealing new information. And never mind that whole thing about Jesus telling his followers to not wash their hands. That we'll set that aside completely. It's just God is not only not revealing, he's giving shitty info.
And penicillin is very easy to produce. They could have produced that in their time with just moldy bread. That's all it needs.
There's arguments that although it wasn't identified as penicillin and what caused it, the function of it was known in Egypt, in China, in other various places. Like, we were using antibiotics without knowing they were antibiotics for a long time, but not in the Christian world.
Correct. Not in the Canaanite lands. They had no knowledge of it, so it wasn't in their book. If I was a god, the first thing I would do is put moldy bread on your wounds. That's it. That's all you got to do. It takes like one passage, and he forgot or doesn't care enough. Work that one out.
So the fact that theists disagree among themselves, I think, makes no difference as to whether or not God exists. The issue, though, is there a God? All I've argued is that there is a supreme being who actually exists. I'm not making an emotional appeal. I'm not condemning you. I'm not using rhetoric to try to sway you. I've simply tried to provide good.
Did he make emotional appeals? I think any argument for morality is kind of veering into that thing, because you're saying, hey, there's got to be objective moral facts. Why does there have to be objective moral facts? So I think a little bit maybe hinging on it, but yeah, he kind of avoided it pretty well. I don't think he did make a appeal to emotion very much at all. It's just, to me, the moral argument always seems to be rooted in this emotional necessity for things to be objectively right and wrong, right? It annoys as if things aren't objectively right and wrong. It seems wrong to us that certain acts, there's no objective protest by the universe for their very existence.
Yeah, like, why should we prefer morality over immorality? Why do we like that? Why do we think that's a good thing? It ultimately comes down to emotion. Now, he wasn't overtly invoking emotion, but the entailments of his implications lead back to emotion.
Reasons and evidence to believe that there is a God. I'm not claiming I can do this with absolute certainty, as we've talked about, but I don't think there's anything we can prove with absolute certainty, except maybe some basic mathematical principles. So as finite beings, we're left in this area, sometimes frustrating, of trying to figure out the truth based on deductive, inductive, and abductive reasoning. I agree, as I said before, with Dan, that we should base our belief on good reasons and evidence, and I think there are good reasons and evidence to believe in God.
If only
There's
he'd
some good
brought
arguments.
some.
Yeah. Because he didn't bring evidence, he brought arguments, and arguments are not evidence. I mean, they can be sort of, they can support evidence. They can show arguments to be correct. Evidence can support arguments, but I don't think that arguments are worth anything on their own. Not unless it's sort of a deductive argument. And as we sort of pointed out, he really failed on the deductive side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Against God. We didn't get a chance to talk about the problem of evil. We could talk more about the hiddenness of God. But at the end of the day, when I compare those arguments against God with the arguments for God, the beginning of the universe, the design of the universe, and these objective moral truths in reality, when I compare both arguments for and against God, it seems to me that the most reasonable explanation is that there is a God who created and designed the universe and who is the source of these objective moral truths. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, what did you think of that?
I'm convinced.
I don't believe you.
Well, I didn't specify what I'm convinced of.
Well, that's true. I'm sorry. I just assumed. I shouldn't assume like that. I must admit.
It was fun. It was funny. I mean, saying multiverse shouldn't be considered valid because it's too strong an argument is wild.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's saying that multiverse can explain anything when you're literally using your God to explain anything is really hypocritical. It's sort of saying, hey, you can't use a universal, unfalsifiable, untestable reason for all of these things that I can't explain. Yeah, so stop. like stop.
Yeah, you
Stop
don't like it.
that.
Would we do it? Maybe
Right.
maybe don't do that. I mean,
yeah, but we weren't saying that was the answer. All it was being used is another option to this deductive argument that it must be God because nothing else explains fine-tuning. And it's like, well, multiverse does. Oh, you can't use that. No, it's upon you to show that that is not a valid option if you're using deduction to say that God is the only option that is an answer. It's on you. Go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the false dichotomies, false trichotomies, false omnichotomy. Ooh, what about an omnichotomy? Can you ever truly reach the deductive end of an infinite regress of cotomies?
I don't know.
Now I'm just so clearly the ibuprofen is working. I'm just silly. Yet still somehow more logical than Andrew Lloyd Webber.
That is true. I know it's Andrew Lloyd Johnson. I just couldn't help saying it over and over and over. Yeah, I've got you saying it, which is terrible. That's terrible.
I'm amused. Of course, I'm easily amused. So, you know.
I just have somebody on the most toxic list that I've got to get rid of. I have been advised that this person has done things like porn bombing atheist streams and trying to get them barred and banned, which is completely unacceptable. P. Mars, your reputation precedes you. You have done atrocious things to people. You have ban avoided on other channels. You have done horrible, horrible things, and you are not welcome here. Go somewhere else.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yep.
I thought that it might be.
No, I had my head moderator come to me and say, hey, he's on the most toxic list and he has done reprehensible things. So, yeah, not welcome here.
I had only heard of that individual in the Mr. Anderson saga when Anderson went delving into the depths of the discords in order to do battle with the legendary destroyer of donuts. Gary.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Duncan Atheist or Darth Dawkins or whatever the hell he's calling himself now. I don't know. I have no wish to talk to that guy again. I've had many comments on my interaction saying it is the best they've seen anybody handle him. I don't know if that's true. I don't keep up with, lots of people have engaged with him. Lots of people have made him look silly. I don't know if I've been the best, but I don't think any conversation is in good faith. The last time I talked to even somebody in his realm, he basically muted me and unmuted it for a yes/no answer. He was that scared of having a conversation. He was just, it was just pointless. Absolutely pointless.
It's the same thing. I mean, pre-sup is silly no matter which way you slice it, but like authoritarian pre-sup is just an absolute waste of fucking time. In my opinion, the only time it's worth any kind of conversation is that infamous discussion between Shan and Q and Darth.
Well, we could do that debate. We could dissect that one. Somebody suggested it. Who suggested that? Someone wrote me an email. And
Pinworm, I believe.
Was it Pinworm? Was that on the Discord? Maybe.
I didn't see it, but yeah, I got a similar email. Which is why it popped into my head. So hey, Pinworm, if you're still around,
you were CC'd in. Oh yeah, I did reply to it, but my reply all game has been off, real off at the moment. Like, I'm so sorry, everybody. My reply all needs to have a swift kick up the ass. The Darth Dawkins Shannon Q debate. I like the idea. I was thinking there was a debate recently with Grayson and Planet Peterson on MDD. That's a possibility as well. And Grayson said he was available. Yes, the Planet Peterson and Grayson. I watched it because those are two awesome guys. So I definitely, I'm sure it was those two.
As you know, I've been avoiding MDD for some time. I tend to watch your debates when you mirror them on your channel.
Yeah. Well, weren't they on together? I'm pretty sure. Planet Peterson, Atheism or Christianity, which is true, was the title of the debate. And it was actually fairly cordial and nice. It was actually it wasn't some kind of dumpster fire or anything. It was actually quite good. It was very reasonable. So I did like it. It was great. So that's another way to do it. Actually, I'll send you a link for that one. Copy link address. I'll put it in the private chat because that was actually a good debate. I really did enjoy it.
Yeah, it could be neat.
They can have good debates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that one. I mean, I trust you can find the Shannon Q one yourself. That's absolutely famous for,
Oh, for sure.
I think that is the last debate that Darth Dawkins did, which wasn't in a room, with complete control over the mute button and stuff. I think it was the last moderated debate he ever did, and probably one of the first he ever did, because he's the worst. He's absolutely the worst. Like, if you can't go in with a neutral moderator and express your case in a logical and rational fashion, then why should anybody take you seriously? Like, seriously, it's just ridiculous. But yeah, I have no wish to, engage with them again. So yeah.
Yeah, I just don't see any point to engaging with pre-sup myself. I mean, like that one we covered with Sai-10 versus Dillahunty, that was so I could laugh at Sai-10.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I've encountered Sai-10. And
I noticed,
it was just like, the whole idea that he doesn't use circular arguments, he uses spirals, is just like, my guy, you're saying that God is real because God is real. Like, that is the most viciously circular argument I have ever heard in my entire life. And you're saying it's not a circle, it's a spiral. I'm sorry. It's just
We should get
what?
Sci10 into our MLM because it's not a pyramid, it's a triangle.
It's a trapezoid. It's a trapezoid. Yeah. Is this a pyramid scheme? No, my scheme is a trapezoid. Just no, trapezoid model. Yeah, awesome. But that'll about do it for this debate. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I mean, some of the stuff the guy was saying, but this was from a long time ago. A lot of these arguments, we don't hear them anymore. That's the thing. Not from Dan Barker's side, but from the theist side, we don't hear a lot of them anymore. We do hear fine tuning occasionally. We do hear some of the stuff occasionally, but a lot of the sort of argument to design and things. Do you hear a lot of that these days?
No, actually, I think it's sort of a generational sort of thing. Like, Bill Craig will still trot them out, but the younger apologists, I forget who did. I want to say Ed, from Rabid Atheist. I'm not 100% sure though, because I watch a lot of videos and my brain is made of meat. But one of the people in our general universe here posited that this increasing tendency towards precept in apologetics, it's sort of an acknowledgement of the weakness of their position. They're rejecting the arguments, these hundreds of years old, many times debunked, but time true whatever arguments, in favor of just saying I must be correct, like, because they know how weak their position is. They have to insist they're correct before the discussion even begins. Well, it's the only way they have any traction.
Well, precept is even worse. I mean, it's just a personal bias, of course, but I like my argument against precept. I think it absolutely demolishes it. I think that, you can accept a precept's assumption of that physical things around us exist, our senses exist, and all of that, without accepting that it comes from a God. And at that point, they're done. They're cooked. That's it. Because they're acknowledging the basis for your worldview, but you're not acknowledging theirs. They're done.
It's Sci10's argument against Islam. Your thing acknowledges my thing. My thing refutes your thing. Therefore, my thing wins.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's and from that perspective, if they're granting that, then they should have to show that their fanfic actually, is true as well. If they're accepting
my
yours,
Spider-Man graphic novel may not have been published by Marvel, but
well, and we're going to do another section next week. We'll be over on the lovely Embers. Please do come along, show her support. I did link her channel, but I will do it again. Or if a moderator could do it, that would be even fantastic. To come back to the atheist cinematic universe, where we have all kinds of people floating in and out, doing all kinds of things. And I gotta work on getting debates and doing. I want to do recorded content, but I don't feel confident in any of it. I think the only way is just to do it and let it suck for a while until I get the hang of it. I think that's the only way to do it, right? That's sort of, it's you've got to get up and walk and then fall over from time to time, and then before long you're running, right? Please agree.
Sort of, yeah. Like, as I frequently tell people, a lot of people will get a hang up over, I want it to be perfect. I want it to this. I want it to that.
Right.
Fucking do it. The first time, it definitionally is going to be the worst one you ever do. Because after that, you'll fix some of the mistakes you made, and then the next one you'll fix even more mistakes, and the next one, and eventually you'll get your thing going. And it's never going to be perfect, because perfect is subjective. Like, should you do a pre-intro before you play your intro graphic as a hook? Some people say yes, some people
I didn't even think about that.
Should you even have an intro graphic? A lot of channels have been doing away with it. But that's all meta stuff. That's back end production stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, there's no perfect way to do it. There's what works for you. I mean, there's things I've done that every person who knows what they're talking about says absolutely help, that in my case hurt. Like, you know,
Okay.
a lot of the videos, well, I purged my videos recently because a lot of them were pre-transition, but and other reasons, but that's a whole other story. But a lot of stuff I was doing was reaction content, and the stuff that's available now is primarily reaction content. And people are like, oh, well, you need to make original content, just you talking about your own ideas. And I've tried that in a few different ways. I've done just straight up direct to the camera chats. I've done in-depth full production things like an episode of the fucking Y-Files on the Shroud of Turin, no less.
Right.
And that was like the lowest viewed video I ever produced. Like,
Wow. Yeah.
that absolutely should knock it out of the park, got nowhere on my channel. So just because a thing works doesn't mean it'll work for you. Conversely, shit that people say should never work, like putting together clips of old clips of evangelicals and talking about how silly they are, that is Joe the Kentucky Atheist most viewed video, you know? So what works
you
for
know,
you,
I think that the algorithm works in mysterious ways, and just because we don't understand it yet doesn't mean we won't understand it at some point in the future. So all of these questions these atheists have, we don't understand it yet. I mean, yeah, it's been 2,000 years and we only have the text and nothing new being given to us. But one day, it kind of reminds me of what Kent Hovind says, like you've got to die and then you'll be told why all the answers.
You have to believe first, though.
Right. You have to believe, then you die, then you'll go to heaven and be told all the things that you missed out on. I really I think that that's a lousy way to work out the truth of anything. But so next week back on M's, we will decide what we're doing. I'm all on board for any of these suggestions. If you do have suggestions, put them in the comments. I definitely will read them. Don't forget to like and subscribe because that helps me out a great deal and it's totally free. The Discord is in the description if you do want to join the Discord. And, you know, I occasionally post stuff on there that interests me and sort of I'm thinking about. And so do people that read and a lot of other people. Titan's sometimes on there and, you know, people are sometimes on there. So, but yeah, do be kind to yourself. Like, don't accept arguments just because it's probabilistic or, you know, somebody thinks it's the only option. We need evidence. We need actual positive evidence to draw a conclusion. And that's perfectly reasonable. Even if it's not reasonable for them, be kind to yourself. It's reasonable to you. That's fine. Be kind to each other. And I will see you in the next one. See you, everybody.